John Mitchell never imagined that his perfect life was built on lies as deep as the foundations of his hotel empire. Behind the pristine shine of crystal chandeliers and the rehearsed smiles of his employees, something dark was lurking. Determined to find out why his prestigious hotel was on the brink of collapse, John assumed a simple identity, donned a waiter's uniform, and stepped into a world he never thought he'd know. What he uncovered there, among hushed whispers and tired eyes, was a devastating truth that threatened not only his legacy, but his very life. With each discovery, the weight of betrayal grows heavier, and the time to save the hotel and himself is running out. But there are secrets that once revealed cannot be buried again. And John is about to find out that the price of the truth may be higher than he ever imagined. John Mitchell stood by the staff entrance of the Mitchell Plaza Hotel in downtown New York City, adjusting the sleeves of the ill-fitting waiter uniform he had borrowed for his month-long undercover mission. As the heir to a multi-million-dollar hotel chain, John had always been on the other side, attending luxury events, overseeing expansions, and signing off on business decisions from the comfort of an office miles away from his properties. But now, as John Matthews, an unassuming new hire, he would finally understand what had gone so wrong in his empire. The decision to work undercover wasn't made lightly. The hotel chain, which John had inherited from his late father, was facing a crisis. Profits were declining, customer reviews were at an all-time low, and internal reports hinted at severe management issues. Mr. Rodriguez, the general manager, had provided excuses, attributing the problems to external factors like economic downturns and shifting guest expectations. But John suspected that something deeper was going on. He had to see it for himself. He inhaled deeply, already feeling the weight of his decision pressing down on him. It was strange to walk through the back doors of his own hotel, stepping into the world that existed behind the scenes. The staff rooms were cramped, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of old coffee, a far cry from the luxurious front lobby that greeted the hotel's guests. John's first day as a waiter began without fanfare. The head of personnel, Sophie, barely looked at him when she handed him his work schedule. "You'll be in the lobby bar during the evening shifts," she said curtly. "Mr. Rodriguez likes things done a certain way. Stick to the routine, don't step out of line, and you'll be fine." Her words, cold and impersonal, lingered with him as he entered the bar area. The staff moved around with a mechanical efficiency, their faces set in expressions of exhaustion. John noticed how quickly they completed their tasks, yet none of them seemed happy. The atmosphere was tense, almost oppressive. It was clear that these employees were under pressure, but the source of their stress wasn't immediately obvious. His first few hours passed uneventfully, but as the night wore on, John began to spot signs of deeper problems. The bartender, a young man named Chris, seemed irritable, snapping at the waiters who approached him with drink orders. A senior server, Linda, moved at a sluggish pace, her body language reflecting a sense of burnout that couldn't be ignored. Guests waited longer than they should have for their orders, and John could overhear some of their complaints. "That's the third time this week someone sent back a drink," Chris muttered, his frustration barely concealed. "Rodriguez keeps cutting back on supplies. We're making cocktails with cheap substitutes. It's no wonder the guests aren't happy." John made a mental note of this. He had already suspected that budget cuts were contributing to the decline in service quality, but hearing it firsthand was different. Still, there was something else, something less tangible, gnawing at the morale of the staff. As his shift ended, John retreated to the staff cafeteria for a quick meal before heading out. The room was small, with a few tired employees slumped over their trays of food. As he picked at his own meal, a bland sandwich, he couldn't help but notice a woman sitting across from him. She looked about his age, perhaps a little younger, her uniform as worn as everyone else's, but her eyes sparkled with an intensity that suggested she hadn't yet succumbed to the hotel's oppressive environment. "First day?" she asked, offering a half smile. John nodded. "Yeah, just getting the hang of things. I'm Emily, she said, extending her hand. I've been here for about 3 years. John Matthews, he replied, shaking her hand. What's it like working here? Emily's smile faded slightly. She glanced around the room as if to make sure no one else was listening before she spoke again, her voice low. It's tough. Ever since Mr. Rodriguez took over as general manager, things have been going downhill. He doesn't care about the staff, only about cutting costs. We're understaffed, overworked, and when things go wrong, we're the ones who get blamed. John felt a surge of anger, but forced himself to stay composed. I've noticed things are a bit tense. Tense? Emily let out a bitter laugh. You have no idea. Rodriguez is ruthless. People are afraid of losing their jobs, so they keep their heads down and do whatever he says, but it's not sustainable. We're all at our breaking point. As she spoke, John couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility. These were his employees, his hotel, and they were suffering under the weight of a management system that had lost touch with reality. Emily's words only confirmed what he had feared. Rodriguez was driving the hotel into the ground, both financially and in terms of staff morale. Before he could ask more, the door to the cafeteria swung open, and in walked Mr. Rodriguez himself, tall with a commanding presence. Rodriguez scanned the room with a look of disdain. His eyes landed on John, lingering for a moment before moving on. I need everyone back on shift, Rodriguez barked. No more breaks until we get these guests sorted out. Emily sighed, standing up and giving John a knowing look. Welcome to the Mitchell Plaza Hotel, she said quietly, before heading back to work. John watched as Rodriguez left the room, his mind racing. He had seen enough on his first day to know that Rodriguez was a problem, but this was only the beginning. He still had a month to uncover the full extent of the issues and figure out how to fix them without blowing his cover. As he made his way out of the hotel, John couldn't shake the feeling that his mission was going to be more complicated than he had anticipated. It wasn't just about numbers and reviews. It was about people, real people who were suffering under the weight of poor management. And now, as John Matthews, he was in the thick of it. John Mitchell, still hidden behind his alias as John Matthews, returned for his second evening shift at the Mitchell Plaza Hotel, his mind swirling with thoughts from the previous night. His conversation with Emily had confirmed his worst fears. The hotel wasn't just struggling financially. It was being choked by mismanagement, and the employees were the ones paying the price. As he stepped through the back entrance once more, John was greeted by the familiar sight of the staff bustling around in preparation for another busy evening. The tension was palpable, a nearly visible weight that pressed down on everyone, making their movements sharp, their conversations clipped. He could see it in the way the employees avoided eye contact with one another, the way they hurried to finish their tasks with an almost frantic energy. They were running on fumes, and it was only a matter of time before something gave. John took his place in the lobby bar again, ready to observe more closely this time. He had to be careful. Any slip-up might arouse suspicion, especially with Rodriguez's eyes constantly scanning the staff for signs of disobedience. But if he was going to fix the hotel, he needed to see everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The first few hours passed in a haze of drink orders and brief interactions with guests. But John's attention wasn't on the customers. It was on the staff, watching how they handled the mounting pressure. It didn't take long for the cracks to start showing. A young woman, Claire, who worked as a receptionist at the front desk, caught his attention. She had been answering phones and checking in guests non-stop, her fingers moving across the keyboard with impressive speed. But the strain was evident in her tight posture and the way her voice trembled slightly with every new call she answered. From his position at the bar, John could see Claire's face grow paler with each passing hour. The line of guests at the reception desk only seemed to get longer, and the phones wouldn't stop ringing. Finally, in a moment of weakness, she let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing her temples as if trying to ward off an oncoming headache. That was when Rodriguez appeared. "Claire!" he barked, his voice carrying across the lobby like a crack of thunder. The entire room seemed to freeze as he marched toward the front desk, his face twisted into a scowl. "What do you think you're doing?" Claire jumped, clearly startled. I'm just trying to keep up with the calls and the check-ins. It's a little overwhelming with only two of us at the desk tonight." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. Overwhelming. His tone dripped with condescension. "Maybe if you focused more on your job and less on complaining, you wouldn't be falling behind." John watched as Claire's face crumpled, her eyes darting toward the guests who were watching the interaction unfold with awkward curiosity. "I wasn't complaining, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm just saying it's hard to keep up with everything." Rodriguez cut her off, leaning in so close that Claire instinctively shrank back. "Let me make something clear," he hissed. "If you can't handle the workload, I'll find someone who can. Do you understand?" Claire nodded mutely, blinking back tears as Rodriguez turned on his heel and stalked away. The entire exchange had lasted less than a minute, but the damage was done. Claire's shoulders slumped as she returned to her tasks, visibly shaken. John's blood boiled. This was exactly what Emily had warned him about. Rodriguez didn't just run the hotel poorly, he ruled through intimidation and fear, treating the staff like disposable tools rather than people. John clenched his fists under the bar, struggling to maintain his composure. If he stepped in now, he would blow his cover. But every instinct screamed at him to do something, anything, to stop Rodriguez from bullying his employees. For now, all he could do was watch and wait. Later that evening, during a lull in the bar, John slipped away to the staff cafeteria again, hoping to find Emily. He needed more information, and Emily seemed like the kind of person who paid attention to what was happening behind the scenes. Sure enough, she was there, sitting alone at a small table with a half-eaten sandwich in front of her. John sat down across from her, and she glanced up, offering a tired smile. "Rough night?" she asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. "You could say that," John replied, glancing around to make sure no one was within earshot. "I saw what happened with Claire earlier. Rodriguez was out of line." Emily scoffed. "Rodriguez is always out of line. That's just how he operates. Keeps everyone on edge, makes sure no one feels secure in their job." John leaned in, lowering his voice. "How long has it been like this?" Emily sighed, pushing her sandwich aside. "It started a few months after he took over. At first, it was just little things, cutting shifts, trimming the budget for supplies, but then he started getting more aggressive. People who complained or couldn't keep up were fired or transferred to worse positions. Now, most of us are too scared to say anything. We just do our jobs and hope we don't get on his bad side." John felt a knot form in his stomach. This was worse than he had imagined. Rodriguez wasn't just mismanaging the hotel, he was creating a toxic environment that was eating away at the staff's morale. If things continued like this, it wouldn't be long before the entire hotel collapsed under the weight of its own dysfunction. "I've heard some people talking about quitting," Emily continued, her voice softening. "But it's not easy to find work in this city, especially in the service industry. Most of us are stuck here, just trying to survive." John frowned, his mind racing. If Rodriguez was driving employees to the point of breaking, then the hotel was already on the brink of disaster. Losing key staff members would only make things worse, and replacing them with undertrained workers would lead to even more problems. As they sat in silence, John's thoughts drifted to his father. The Mitchell Plaza Hotel had once been a symbol of success, a place where guests came to experience the best that the city had to offer. His father had built the business from the ground up, treating his employees with respect and ensuring that the hotel was a place people wanted to work. Now, that legacy was being tarnished by a man who cared more about power and control than about the people who made the hotel run. "I don't know how much longer we can keep going like this," Emily said quietly, breaking the silence. "Something has to change." John nodded, his resolve hardening. "It will," he said softly. "Soon." As the night wore on, John returned to his post at the bar, but his mind was elsewhere. He had seen enough. Rodriguez was a problem, and if the hotel was going to survive, John would have to deal with him. But it wasn't just about firing Rodriguez and calling it a day. The damage ran deeper than that. The entire culture of the hotel had shifted, and it would take more than just a management change to fix things. He would need to gain the trust of the staff, to find out what they needed and how he could help them. And most importantly, he would need to do it without revealing who he really was. At least, not yet. As John wiped down the bar at the end of the night, he caught Rodriguez watching him from across the room, his expression unreadable. There was something in his eyes that made John uneasy. Rodriguez was suspicious, no doubt about it. If John wasn't careful, his cover could be blown before he had a chance to make a difference. But John was determined. This was his hotel, and he wasn't going to let it fall apart. Not without a fight. The following evening, John arrived at the hotel with the same sense of anticipation that had been gnawing at him since he first stepped into his role as John Matthews. There was something about being in disguise, hidden in plain sight among his own employees, that made every moment feel like it was teetering on the edge of discovery. After his conversation with Emily the previous night, John's focus sharpened. He had to keep his eyes and ears open, not just for Rodriguez's mistreatment of the staff, but also for the subtle undercurrents of fear and resentment that were building among the employees. If he could understand the root of the problems, maybe he could find a way to fix them. John began his shift as usual, wiping down tables in the bar area and delivering drinks to guests. His interactions with the customers were smooth. He had always been good with people, but his mind was elsewhere, constantly assessing the atmosphere around him. It didn't take long for the first sign of trouble to emerge. As he cleared a table near the front desk, John overheard a heated conversation between Sophie, the head of personnel, and a group of housekeepers. Sophie stood with her arms crossed, her tone sharp as she addressed the women. "Look, I don't care how many rooms you have to clean," Sophie said, her voice low but biting. "We're short-staffed, and we need all the rooms ready for the weekend. If that means staying late, then that's what you'll do." One of the housekeepers, an older woman named Maria, stepped forward, clearly agitated. "We've already been working overtime every day this week. We're exhausted. You can't keep pushing us like this." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "I don't want to hear complaints. You're paid to do a job, and you'll do it. If you don't like it, you're welcome to leave." John felt a surge of anger as he watched the exchange. Sophie's words were dismissive, her demeanor cold. It was clear that the housekeepers were being overworked, and their exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. Maria's hands shook as she clenched her cleaning supplies, her face etched with frustration and fatigue. "We're doing our best," Maria continued, her voice strained, "but we need more help. The hotel is understaffed, and we can't keep up with this pace." Sophie glanced around, clearly unimpressed. "Maybe if you worked faster, you wouldn't have this problem." The comment hung in the air like a slap. The housekeepers exchanged looks, but none of them dared to speak again. John clenched his fists at his sides, forcing himself to stay silent. He needed more information before he could act, but every instinct in him wanted to step in, to tell Sophie that she was out of line. As the housekeepers dispersed, their shoulders slumped in defeat, John caught Maria's eye. For a brief moment, their gazes locked, and in that instant, John saw the depth of her exhaustion. These weren't just employees struggling to keep up with work. They were people being crushed under the weight of a system that didn't care about them. He made a mental note to talk to Emily later. She seemed to have her finger on the pulse of what was happening behind the scenes, and if anyone could help him understand the full scope of the problem, it was her. As the night wore on, John found himself in the staff break room once again, hoping to catch a moment alone with Emily. He didn't have to wait long. She entered a few minutes after him, looking just as tired as the rest of the staff, but there was still a spark of determination in her eyes. "Rough shift?" John asked, offering her a cup of coffee from the machine. Emily took the cup with a grateful nod. "Always," she said with a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "What about you? Still getting used to life as a waiter?" John shrugged, keeping his tone light. "It's different, but I'm learning. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the vending machine the only sound in the room. John could sense there was something on Emily's mind, something she wasn't saying. "What's really going on here, Emily?" he asked quietly. "It's more than just long shifts and budget cuts, isn't it?" Emily hesitated, staring into her cup of coffee as if searching for the right words. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "It's Rodriguez. He's more than just a bad boss. He's dangerous. He's been pushing people to their limits for months, cutting staff, reducing pay, and threatening anyone who complains." John leaned forward, his attention focused. "What do you mean by dangerous?" Emily glanced around the room, as if making sure they weren't being overheard. "I've seen people fired for the smallest things. He's created a culture of fear. People are scared to speak up because they know Rodriguez will find a way to get rid of them if they do. And it's not just him. Sophie is in on it too. She's his right hand, always covering for him, making sure no one steps out of line." John frowned, digesting the information. This was worse than he had imagined. Rodriguez wasn't just running the hotel into the ground with poor management. He was actively oppressing his staff, using fear and intimidation to maintain control. It was a toxic environment, and it was only a matter of time before it all collapsed. "Has anyone tried to report him?" John asked. "What about HR?" Emily let out a bitter laugh. "HR? That's a joke. Sophie runs HR, and she's just as bad as Rodriguez. They cover for each other. If anyone tries to file a complaint, it gets buried, or the person gets fired. No one's willing to risk it." John's mind raced. This wasn't just about saving the hotel's reputation anymore. It was about saving the people who worked there. If what Emily was saying was true, and John had no reason to doubt her, then Rodriguez and Sophie had created a fortress of corruption that would be difficult to break through. "I don't know how much longer I can stay here," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love this place. I used to be proud to work here, but now it's like every day is a battle just to survive." John nodded, understanding her frustration. He wanted to tell her that things would get better, that he had a plan to fix everything, but he couldn't reveal his identity. Not yet. For now, all he could do was listen and gather as much information as possible. "Hang in there," he said softly. "Things will change." Emily gave him a small, tired smile. "I hope you're right." The rest of John's shift passed uneventfully, but the weight of what Emily had told him lingered in his mind. As he cleaned up the bar at the end of the night, he kept replaying her words. If Rodriguez and Sophie were truly running the hotel like a dictatorship, then it was going to take more than just firing them to fix the problem. The entire culture of fear and oppression needed to be dismantled, and that was a monumental task. As he walked through the hotel lobby on his way out, John spotted Rodriguez standing by the reception desk, his arms crossed as he spoke to Sophie. From the way they stood, the smug expressions on their faces, John could tell they were confident in their control over the hotel. They believed they were untouchable, but John wasn't going to let them get away with it. He had a responsibility, not just as the owner of the hotel, but as someone who cared about the people working under him. He couldn't stand by and watch as Rodriguez destroyed everything his father had built. The first step was clear. John needed to gather more evidence. He needed to understand exactly how Rodriguez and Sophie were operating, how deep the corruption went, and what it would take to bring them down. And he needed to do it all without blowing his cover. As he stepped out into the cool night air, John's mind was already working on a plan. He couldn't reveal himself yet, but he could start making moves behind the scenes, quietly building the case against Rodriguez. It wasn't going to be easy, but John had never been one to back down from a challenge. John Mitchell stood at the bar counter, wiping down the surface with practiced efficiency as the final guests of the evening trickled out of the hotel lobby. It was late, and the usual clamor of the hotel had given way to a tense stillness, the kind of quiet that made every small sound, every distant footstep, every hushed conversation seem amplified. He was deep in thought, replaying the events of the past few days. The more he saw, the clearer it became. Mitchell Plaza wasn't just in trouble, it was on the verge of collapse. Rodriguez's stranglehold over the hotel had created a toxic environment, one that was choking the life out of the business from the inside. But knowing this wasn't enough. If John was going to save the hotel, he needed to gather more concrete evidence. He needed to understand the full scope of Rodriguez's influence, especially his alliance with Sophie. What exactly were they hiding? He finished cleaning the bar, glancing up just in time to see Rodriguez walk into the lobby, flanked by Sophie. The two were deep in conversation, their heads close together, their expressions dark and conspiratorial. John kept his movements slow and casual, careful not to attract attention as he listened in from a distance. "I don't care what the staff thinks," Rodriguez muttered, his voice low but sharp. "We're pushing these budget cuts through, and that's final. The board won't care as long as we keep the numbers in the green." Sophie nodded, glancing nervously around. "What about the complaints? The staff is getting restless, and the guests are starting to notice. We've had more complaints about service quality in the last month than we've had in the last year." Rodriguez's lips curled into a sneer. "Let them complain. As long as we cut costs and keep the profit margins up, the board won't bat an eye. We'll keep things running this way until the end of the quarter, and after that, it won't matter." John's heart raced as he absorbed their words. This wasn't just poor management. They were deliberately cutting corners, sacrificing service quality and the well-being of the staff to meet short-term financial goals. If the board had any idea what was really going on, they'd be furious. But Rodriguez and Sophie had created a fortress of secrecy, hiding the true extent of the problems from anyone with the power to stop them. As the two of them walked toward the elevators, John silently vowed that he would bring their operation to light. But for now, he had to keep his head down. Rodriguez's suspicions were already growing, and one wrong move could blow his cover before he had enough evidence to act. The next morning, John arrived early for his shift, deciding to spend some time observing the hotel's operations from behind the scenes. He had learned a lot from talking to Emily, but there were still gaps in his understanding of how the staff functioned under Rodriguez's oppressive regime. Today, he planned to quietly gather more information from other employees, hoping to piece together the full picture. As he entered the staff cafeteria, he noticed the same sense of weariness in the air, the same defeated looks on the faces of the workers. But today, there was something different, an undercurrent of tension that was hard to ignore. Conversations were quieter than usual, and the few smiles that existed felt strained. John grabbed a coffee and sat at one of the long tables, positioning himself close enough to overhear a group of housekeepers who were speaking in low voices. "I heard Rodriguez is planning more staff cuts," one of them said, her voice trembling. "They're going to get rid of the night shift team and make us cover more hours." Another woman shook her head in disbelief. "That's impossible. We're already stretched too thin. If they cut any more people, we won't be able to keep up with the workload." John's mind raced. Rodriguez wasn't just overworking the staff, he was actively planning to reduce the workforce even further. The hotel was already running on fumes, and any more cuts would push the staff past their breaking point. It was a disaster waiting to happen. "Why don't we say something?" one of the younger housekeepers asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There has to be someone higher up who can stop him." The older housekeeper let out a bitter laugh. "Who? Sophie runs HR, and Rodriguez has the board in his pocket. We're stuck." John frowned. The situation was worse than he had realized. Rodriguez wasn't just cutting costs to save money. He was exploiting the system, manipulating the board while keeping the staff under his thumb. The more John listened, the more he understood how deep the rot went. He needed to act, but how? Later that day, John found himself back in the lobby bar, serving drinks to a group of business travelers. As he worked, he kept his eyes on the staff moving through the lobby, particularly the interactions between the front desk workers and the guests. One interaction, in particular, caught his attention. Linda, a receptionist who had been with the hotel for years, was dealing with a difficult guest, a man who was loudly complaining about his room not being ready on time. From his position behind the bar, John watched as Linda remained calm, offering polite apologies and trying to de-escalate the situation, but the guest wasn't having it. He slammed his hand on the counter, his voice rising. "I've been waiting for over an hour. This is unacceptable. I demand to speak to a manager." Linda's face remained neutral, but John could see the stress lines around her eyes. She picked up the phone, clearly preparing to call for assistance, when Rodriguez appeared, moving swiftly across the lobby toward the commotion. "What seems to be the problem here?" Rodriguez asked, his voice smooth but laced with irritation. The guest immediately rounded on him. "The problem is your hotel's incompetence. My room isn't ready, and I've been waiting for over an hour. This is supposed to be a 5-star establishment, but it's a joke." Rodriguez didn't even glance at Linda as he addressed the guest. "I apologize for the inconvenience. I'll personally see to it that your room is ready in the next few minutes." He then turned to Linda, his face hard. "Make sure this guest is upgraded to a suite and hurry up." Linda hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding, her face paling as she rushed to comply. John watched as Rodriguez continued to smooth things over with the guest. His charm turned up to full volume, but there was something chilling about the way he handled the situation. It wasn't about solving the problem, but about maintaining control. As soon as the guest was satisfied, Rodriguez turned on Linda, his voice low and venomous. "You'd better not make me look bad like that again. Do your job, or I'll find someone who can..." John's hands tightened around the edge of the bar, his frustration growing. Rodriguez was playing a dangerous game, one that was pushing the staff to their limits while keeping up appearances for the guests. It was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. At the end of his shift, John met up with Emily again. She looked even more tired than usual. Her shoulders slumped as she collapsed into a chair in the staff break room. "Rodriguez had it out for Linda today," John said, his voice low. "He's going to keep pushing people until something snaps." Emily nodded, rubbing her temples. "It's only a matter of time. People are already talking about quitting, but no one can afford to leave." John hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. What if there was a way to stop him? To expose what he's doing? Emily looked up at him, her expression wary. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if someone could gather proof of what's going on behind the scenes, maybe the board would listen. Maybe we could get Rodriguez out." Emily's eyes widened. "You can't be serious. No one's ever been able to get that kind of proof. Rodriguez is too careful. And even if someone did, Sophie would bury it." John leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What if I told you I'm working on it?" Emily stared at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. "Are you crazy? If Rodriguez finds out..." "He won't find out," John said firmly. "But I need your help. You know this place better than anyone. You know how things work behind the scenes." Emily bit her lip, clearly torn. "John, I don't know if this is a good idea." "It's the only way things will ever change," John replied. "You said it yourself. Something has to give." For a long moment, Emily didn't say anything. Then, finally, she nodded, her expression resolute. "All right, I'm in. But you'd better be careful. If Rodriguez finds out what we're up to, we're both done for." John smiled grimly. "Don't worry, I've got a plan." John Mitchell knew that the next few days would be crucial. After recruiting Emily to help gather evidence against Rodriguez, the weight of his responsibility felt heavier than ever. The employees at Mitchell Plaza were counting on him, even if they didn't know it. But as John Matthews, he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Rodriguez was already suspicious, and one wrong move could unravel everything. It was the start of another long shift at the hotel, and John felt the familiar unease settle over him as he walked through the back entrance. The dimly lit hallway leading to the staff rooms felt like the calm before a storm. He was keenly aware of how much the atmosphere had deteriorated since his arrival. Employees moved with the same robotic efficiency, but there was something darker in the air now, a tension that couldn't be ignored. John entered the staff locker room and noticed Chris, The bartender slumped against one of the lockers, rubbing his temples as if trying to ward off a headache. "Long night?" John asked, trying to strike up casual conversation as he changed into his uniform. Chris glanced at him, his expression weary. "Long week, more like." "Between Rodriguez breathing down our necks and the guests getting more demanding, it's a miracle anyone here is still standing." John nodded, sympathizing. He had seen firsthand how relentless the pace was and how little appreciation Rodriguez showed to his staff. Chris's hands shook slightly as he reached for a bottle of painkillers in his locker, popping 2 into his mouth before washing them down with water. "You think things are going to get worse?" John asked, keeping his tone casual but probing. Chris let out a bitter laugh. "Worse? You've been here long enough, Matthews. You've seen how Rodriguez runs this place. Every time you think it can't get worse, it does." John took in the bartender's words, filing them away with the growing list of grievances he had witnessed. Every interaction like this was more evidence, more confirmation that Rodriguez was destroying the hotel from the inside. Later that day, John found Emily in the staff cafeteria. They had agreed to meet during their break to discuss the next steps in their plan. She looked more on edge than usual, her eyes darting around the room as if she was worried someone might overhear their conversation. "Did something happen?" John asked as he sat down across from her, his voice low. Emily sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Rodriguez is getting paranoid. I heard him talking to Sophie this morning. He's convinced someone's spying on him. He's been watching the staff more closely, looking for anything out of the ordinary." John's stomach tightened. If Rodriguez was already suspicious, it meant they had to be even more careful. Any misstep could blow their entire operation before they had the chance to gather enough evidence. "What do you think we should do?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with worry. John leaned forward, speaking quietly. "We need to stay the course, but we'll have to be more discreet. I've been thinking about how to get access to Rodriguez's files. There has to be something in his records that shows what he's been doing with the budget cuts and staff changes." Emily's eyes widened. "You're not serious. His office is off limits. There's no way you could get in without raising suspicion." John smiled faintly. "Not if we time it right. Rodriguez leaves for a lunch meeting every Thursday afternoon. He's gone for at least 2 hours. If we can get into his office during that window, we might be able to find something." Emily looked conflicted, biting her lip as she considered his plan. "That's risky, John. If you get caught." "I won't get caught," John said confidently, though he felt a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. "But I need you to keep watch. Make sure no one comes into the office while I'm inside." Emily hesitated for a moment longer before nodding. "All right, I'll do it. But you'd better be quick." John gave her a reassuring smile, though his mind was already racing with the details of the plan. This was their best chance to gather real evidence against Rodriguez, and they couldn't afford to waste it. The next day came quickly, and as Thursday afternoon approached, John felt the familiar rush of adrenaline building in his veins. The plan had to go off without a hitch. Rodriguez's office was the key to everything. If they could uncover financial records or incriminating emails, it would be enough to take him down. John waited in the staff locker room, pretending to be busy with some routine cleaning while keeping an eye on the clock. His shift didn't officially start until later, but he had arranged to be in the hotel early so he could carry out the plan. At precisely 1 p.m., he saw Rodriguez walk briskly through the lobby, heading for the front doors. John felt a surge of relief. He was sticking to his usual schedule. Now was their window of opportunity. Emily was waiting in the hallway outside the office when John arrived. She gave him a tense nod, her eyes scanning the corridor to make sure no one was watching. "Rodriguez just left," she whispered. "You've got 2 hours, maybe less. Be careful." John nodded, his heart pounding as he slipped inside Rodriguez's office. The room was exactly as he had imagined, neatly organized, with expensive leather chairs and dark wooden furniture. A large desk sat in the center, its surface covered with files, a laptop and a sleek black phone. John wasted no time, heading straight for the laptop. He had to be quick. He didn't know how much time he had before someone came looking for Rodriguez. The laptop was password protected, as he had expected, but John had anticipated this. He had noticed Rodriguez enter his password once before, just a quick glance from across the room when Rodriguez wasn't paying attention, and he had memorized the keystrokes. Holding his breath, John typed in the password. The screen unlocked with a quiet chime. John let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Now came the hard part. He quickly navigated through the folders on the laptop, searching for anything that might indicate Rodriguez's plans for the hotel. Financial records, emails, anything that could prove the extent of the mismanagement. As he searched, John's pulse quickened. Rodriguez had been careful. Most of the files were encrypted, and there was little in the way of obvious evidence. But then, buried deep in one of the financial folders, John found something that caught his eye. A series of transactions that didn't add up. Funds that had been allocated to maintenance and renovations were being redirected to other accounts, but there were no records of where the money was actually going. John's hands flew over the keyboard as he copied the files onto a USB drive he had brought with him. This was it, the proof he needed. If he could connect these transactions to Rodriguez, it would be enough to bring him down. He was just about to log off when he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching the office. John's heart stopped. He quickly closed the laptop, slipping the USB drive into his pocket just as the door handle turned. Sophie stepped into the room, her sharp eyes immediately landing on John. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded, her tone cold and suspicious. John froze, his mind racing as he tried to come up with an excuse. He couldn't afford to slip up now, not when he was so close. "I was just cleaning," John said, holding up a rag he had brought with him as part of his cover. "Rodriguez asked me to tidy up his office while he was out." Sophie narrowed her eyes, clearly not buying his story. "Rodriguez doesn't let anyone in here, especially not some waiter." John felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. He needed to get out of here, and fast. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overstep. I'll leave." Before Sophie could respond, John slipped past her, his heart pounding in his chest as he hurried down the hallway. He didn't look back until he reached the safety of the staff locker room, where he finally allowed himself to breathe. That had been too close, but he had what he came for. The USB drive in his pocket was the key to exposing Rodriguez's corruption. Now, all he had to do was figure out how to use it. The adrenaline from John's close call with Sophie had yet to wear off by the time he clocked in for his next shift at Mitchell Plaza Hotel. The weight of the USB drive in his pocket felt heavier than ever, a constant reminder that he was playing a dangerous game. He had what he needed, evidence of Rodriguez's mismanagement and corruption, financial transactions that didn't add up, records that showed money being funneled into questionable accounts. But now came the hard part, figuring out how to use the information without tipping off Rodriguez or Sophie. They were both suspicious, and any misstep could end the whole operation. As John walked through the bustling lobby, he kept his head down, trying to blend in as he always did, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie's eyes were on him. He could still picture her cold expression from the day before, the way she had looked at him as if she knew he didn't belong in Rodriguez's office. He had to be careful. He couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. Later that evening, John found a quiet corner in the staff cafeteria and slipped his phone from his pocket. He had already transferred the files from the USB drive to his phone, and now he was scrolling through the documents, his mind racing as he tried to piece together Rodriguez's scheme. The financial transactions were complex, but it was clear that Rodriguez had been diverting funds meant for hotel maintenance and renovations into a series of private accounts. The money wasn't being used for the hotel at all. It was disappearing into Rodriguez's pockets, while the staff and the hotel itself suffered. John felt a surge of anger as he thought about the underpaid, overworked staff struggling to keep the hotel running while Rodriguez lined his pockets. The hotel was falling apart, and the people who depended on it were paying the price. John, he looked up to see Emily standing over him, her expression tense. She glanced around the cafeteria, making sure no one was watching, before slipping into the seat across from him. "Did you get it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John nodded, pulling the phone closer so she could see the screen. "I've got everything. Financial records, transactions that don't make sense. Rodriguez has been stealing from the hotel for months. Maybe longer." Emily's eyes widened as she stared at the documents. "This is it," she whispered. "This is enough to take him down." John nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. They had the evidence, but now came the hard part, figuring out what to do with it. "We need to be smart about this," John said quietly. "We can't just go to HR. Sophie's got that department locked down, and Rodriguez will cover it up before anyone has a chance to look at it." Emily bit her lip, her mind clearly racing. "What about the board? Could we get this to them?" John hesitated. The board was an option, but it wasn't without risk. If Rodriguez found out they were going to the board, he'd destroy the evidence before they even had a chance to present it. "We could," John said slowly, "but we need to be careful. If Rodriguez gets wind of this before we can get it to the right people, it's over." Emily nodded, her expression grim. "So, what's the plan?" John stared at the phone, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He needed time to think, to plan their next move, but time wasn't a luxury they had. Rodriguez was growing more paranoid by the day, and Sophie was already suspicious. "We'll have to find a way to get this to the board without going through the usual channels," John said finally. "Maybe we can get a meeting with someone high up, someone who isn't under Rodriguez's thumb." Emily frowned. "Do you know anyone like that?" John hesitated, his mind racing. He did know someone. One of the board members, Richard Collins, had been close to his father and had always been a trusted advisor. Richard had distanced himself from the day-to-day operations of the hotel in recent years, but if anyone would listen to John's concerns, it would be him. "I might," John said slowly, "but it's a long shot. I'll need to be careful about how I approach him." Emily nodded, her expression serious. "We don't have a lot of time, John. Rodriguez is getting paranoid. If he finds out what we're doing..." John met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. Time was running out. The next day, John's shift passed in a blur. He went through the motions, serving drinks at the bar, clearing tables, nodding politely to guests, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the files on his phone, about the risk they were taking by keeping the evidence hidden for so long. By the time his shift ended, John had made up his mind. He needed to act, and he needed to act soon. But before he could take the next step, he had to find a way to meet with Richard Collins. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A few days later, John overheard a conversation between two guests in the lobby. They were discussing an upcoming board meeting scheduled to take place at the hotel that weekend. John's heart raced. Richard Collins would almost certainly be there. He couldn't believe his luck. This was his chance to present the evidence directly to Richard, without going through any of the usual channels. But he had to be careful. Rodriguez would be at the meeting too, and any sign that John was up to something could ruin everything. John spent the rest of the week preparing, running over the plan in his head. He couldn't afford any mistakes. He needed to find a moment alone with Richard, a brief window where he could explain everything and hand over the evidence. The day of the board meeting arrived, and the hotel was buzzing with activity. High-profile executives and board members filled the lobby, their presence sending a ripple of excitement through the staff. Rodriguez was in rare form, strutting through the lobby with an air of confidence, as if he owned the place. John stayed in the background, keeping a low profile as he went about his usual tasks. He spotted Richard Collins in the crowd, talking to a few other board members near the front desk. John's heart pounded in his chest. This was his chance. But before he could make his move, Rodriguez walked into the room, his eyes scanning the crowd. For a moment, their gazes locked, and John felt a chill run down his spine. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion flickering in his expression. John quickly looked away, busying himself with wiping down a table. He couldn't afford to draw any attention to himself now, not when he was so close. After what felt like an eternity, the board members began to file into one of the meeting rooms. John watched as Richard Collins followed the others inside, his mind racing. He had to find a way to get Richard alone after the meeting, but how? Just as the door to the meeting room closed, John felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see Emily standing behind him, her expression tense. "John, we've got a problem," she whispered urgently. "Sophie's been asking around about you. She's convinced you're up to something." John's stomach dropped. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. Sophie's suspicions were growing, and it was only a matter of time before she uncovered the truth. "We don't have much time," Emily continued. "If Sophie finds out what we're doing before you can get the evidence to the board." John nodded, his mind racing. The window of opportunity was closing fast. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to act now, before Rodriguez or Sophie could stop him. "I'm going to find a way to get Richard alone after the meeting," John said quietly. "Once I get the evidence to him, it's over for Rodriguez." Emily looked at him, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "Be careful, John. If this goes wrong—" "It won't," John said, though his heart was pounding. "It can't." Hours later, the board meeting finally came to an end. John positioned himself near the exit, waiting for his chance. As the board members began to leave the room, John spotted Richard Collins near the back of the group, talking to one of his colleagues. Now, John approached Richard cautiously, glancing around to make sure Rodriguez or Sophie wasn't nearby. "Mr. Collins," he said quietly, "can I have a moment of your time? It's important." Richard looked at him, surprised to see a waiter addressing him so directly. But something in John's tone must have caught his attention, because he nodded, stepping away from the group. "What is it?" Richard asked, his voice low. John took a deep breath. "There's something you need to see. It's about Rodriguez. He's been stealing from the hotel, and I have proof." Richard's eyes widened slightly. "What are you talking about?" John quickly explained the situation, pulling out his phone and showing Richard the financial records he had gathered. Richard's expression grew more serious with each passing moment. "I don't believe this," Richard muttered, shaking his head. "How long has this been going on?" "4 months, maybe longer," John replied. "We need to act fast. If Rodriguez finds out that we're onto him—" Richard nodded, his expression hardening. "Leave it with me. I'll handle it." John felt a wave of relief wash over him. The evidence was in the right hands now. Rodriguez's days of controlling the hotel were numbered. The atmosphere inside the Mitchell Plaza Hotel felt heavier than usual the morning after John passed the evidence to Richard Collins. For the first time since going undercover, John allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. He had done his part. Now it was up to Richard to confront Rodriguez and put an end to his corrupt reign over the hotel. But until that confrontation happened, John couldn't afford to relax. As he made his way through the back corridors toward the bar, John could sense that something was different. The staff moved with even more tension than usual, their faces tight, their conversations hushed. It was as if everyone was bracing for a storm that hadn't yet arrived. He arrived at the bar and found Chris already setting up for the day, his expression grim. John slid into his routine, wiping down counters and restocking supplies, but his mind kept drifting back to the board meeting, wondering what would happen next. Would Richard confront Rodriguez today? Tomorrow? How would Rodriguez react when he realized his scheme had been exposed? John didn't have to wait long to find out. By late morning, the hotel lobby was unusually quiet, the usual hustle of guests and staff giving way to a tense calm. John was delivering drinks to a small group of businessmen near the reception desk when he saw Sophie walk into the lobby, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished floor, and John's heart sank as she approached the front desk. Linda, the receptionist who had been scolded by Rodriguez days earlier, was busy helping a guest check in when Sophie's voice sliced through the air. "Linda, Sophie said sharply. "I need to speak with you." Linda looked up, startled. "Can it wait, Sophie? I'm in the middle of—" "Now," Sophie interrupted, her voice cold and firm. Linda hesitated for a moment before excusing herself from the guest and following Sophie toward the staff office behind the reception area. John watched them go, a sense of dread creeping up his spine. He didn't know what Sophie wanted, but her tone didn't bode well for anyone. John continued his work, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Sophie had been watching the staff closely for the past few days, her suspicion of John growing ever since she had found him in Rodriguez's office. Now, it seemed, she was taking more aggressive action. A few minutes later, Linda emerged from the office, her face pale and her hands trembling. She walked back to the front desk with slow, shaky steps, her eyes wide with shock. John could tell something bad had happened, and his heart sank as he approached her. "Linda," he said quietly, "what happened?" Linda glanced around the lobby, her voice barely a whisper. "She fired me." John's stomach dropped. "What? Why?" Linda shook her head, her voice trembling. "She said I wasn't keeping up with my duties, that I wasn't meeting the hotel's standards. But it's not true. I've been working harder than ever." John clenched his fists, struggling to control the anger rising in his chest. This was Rodriguez's doing. He was tightening his grip on the hotel, getting rid of anyone he saw as a threat to his control. And Sophie was helping him do it. "I'm sorry, Linda," John said quietly, feeling a deep sense of guilt. He had hoped that things would change once he passed the evidence to Richard, but it seemed that Rodriguez was still holding on to power with an iron fist. Linda nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what I'm going to do. I've worked here for years. This place was like a second home to me." John swallowed hard, feeling a knot form in his throat. "It's not right. None of this is right." Linda wiped her eyes, trying to maintain her composure. "Be careful, John. Sophie's been watching everyone closely. She's looking for any reason to fire people. Don't give her an excuse." John nodded, his mind racing. Sophie was tightening the noose around the staff, and if he wasn't careful, he would be next. As the day wore on, the tension in the hotel only seemed to grow. Sophie's presence loomed over everything, her sharp eyes constantly scanning the staff, searching for any sign of disobedience. Every interaction felt loaded with suspicion, every mistake a potential death sentence for someone's job. John found himself glancing over his shoulder more often, his nerves on edge. He knew that Sophie and Rodriguez were growing more paranoid by the day, but now it seemed they were actively weeding out anyone who wasn't loyal to them. At one point, John saw Sophie speaking with Mr. Rodriguez in the hallway near the elevators. They were too far away for him to hear what they were saying, but their body language spoke volumes. Rodriguez's face was tense, his arms crossed tightly across his chest, while Sophie's expression was calm but calculating. John had the distinct feeling that they were discussing the staff and that he might be part of that conversation. He didn't have much time to dwell on it, though, because his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Emily. "Meet me in the break room. Urgent." John's pulse quickened as he quickly finished his task and made his way to the staff break room. Emily was already there when he arrived, pacing back and forth, her face a mask of worry. "What's going on?" John asked, closing the door behind him. Emily stopped pacing and turned to him, her voice low and urgent. "I just heard from one of the housekeeping staff. Sophie's planning to fire more people. She's targeting anyone she thinks might be a threat." John's heart sank. "How many people?" "I don't know," Emily said, shaking her head, "but I heard her talking to Rodriguez earlier. They're tightening their grip on the hotel, and they're not going to stop until they get rid of anyone who doesn't fall in line." John ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. He had hoped that once Richard had the evidence, things would start to change. But it seemed that Rodriguez was doubling down, trying to consolidate his power before the board had a chance to act. "We need to stay calm," John said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Richard has the evidence. It's only a matter of time before he confronts Rodriguez." Emily nodded, but her expression remained tense. "What if it's not enough? What if Rodriguez finds out what we're doing before the board takes action?" John didn't have an answer for that. They were walking a tightrope, and any misstep could send everything crashing down. "We'll have to be more careful," John said quietly. "Keep our heads down. Avoid drawing attention. We're too close to give up now." Emily nodded, but John could see the fear in her eyes. They were running out of time. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxious glances and tense conversations. John did his best to keep a low profile, but it was clear that Sophie's suspicions were growing by the hour. Every time she passed by, John could feel her eyes on him, as if she was waiting for him to slip up. By the time his shift ended, John was exhausted, both mentally and physically. He had never felt so on edge in his life, and the weight of the secret he was carrying felt heavier with each passing day. As he left the hotel that evening, John found himself staring up at the tall, gleaming building that had once been his father's pride and joy. Mitchell Plaza had been a symbol of success, a place where people came to experience luxury and comfort. But now, it was a place of fear and corruption, its staff living in constant fear of losing their jobs, its guests unaware of the chaos happening behind the scenes. John clenched his fists, feeling a surge of determination. He couldn't let Rodriguez destroy everything his father had built. He had to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. The next morning, John arrived at the hotel early, determined to keep his head down and avoid drawing any attention. But as soon as he stepped into the lobby, he knew something was wrong. The tension in the air was palpable, and the usual hustle and bustle of the hotel had been replaced by an eerie quiet. Staff members moved quickly and quietly through the lobby, their eyes downcast, their faces pale. John's stomach churned as he made his way to the bar. Chris was already there, wiping down the counter with slow, deliberate movements. When he saw John, he gave him a grim nod. "Something's going on," Chris muttered under his breath. "Everyone's on edge." Before John could respond, he saw Rodriguez stride into the lobby, flanked by Sophie. They moved with purpose, their faces set in grim determination. John's heart raced as they walked past him, heading straight for the staff office. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't good. John Mitchell entered Mitchell Plaza Hotel early that morning, the familiar weight of anxiety settling over him like a heavy cloak. The previous day's events had left him on edge, and now, with each passing hour, it felt like the walls were closing in around him. Sophie had been on the warpath, firing Linda and targeting other staff members who didn't fall in line. The atmosphere in the hotel had shifted from tense to oppressive, and John knew that Rodriguez was behind it. They were tightening their grip on the staff, weeding out anyone who could be a threat. As John made his way through the staff corridors, he noticed that people were speaking in hushed tones, their faces pale and drawn. Everyone was on edge, afraid that they might be the next target. It was a palpable fear, and it only reinforced John's resolve to bring Rodriguez down. But time was running out. John knew that Richard Collins had the evidence, but there had been no sign of action yet. Each day that passed without a response from the board increased the risk that Rodriguez or Sophie would discover what John and Emily were doing. And if that happened, there would be no saving the hotel. As John entered the staff break room, he found Emily waiting for him. She was seated at one of the tables, her fingers nervously tapping against the surface. Her eyes met his, filled with the same worry that had been gnawing at him for days. "Any news?" Emily asked quietly, as John sat down across from her. John shook his head, frustration clear on his face. "Nothing yet. I've been waiting for Richard to make a move, but I don't know how long we can keep this up." "Rodriguez is getting more aggressive," Emily nodded, her voice tight. "Sophie fired 3 more people this morning, housekeeping staff. She's trying to get rid of anyone she thinks might be against Rodriguez." John's chest tightened. This was exactly what he had feared. Rodriguez and Sophie were consolidating their power, making sure there was no one left to stand in their way. "We can't wait much longer," John said, his voice tense. "If the board doesn't act soon, Rodriguez is going to clean house. And if he finds out about the evidence..." "He won't," Emily said firmly, though her expression betrayed her uncertainty. "Richard will come through. He has to." John wanted to believe that. He wanted to trust that Richard would step in and put an end to Rodriguez's corruption. But with each passing day, that hope seemed to slip further out of reach. "We'll have to be careful," John said quietly. "Rodriguez is going to be watching everyone more closely now. If we make one wrong move—" "I know," Emily interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel it. He's waiting for someone to slip up." John nodded, his thoughts racing. He had to figure out their next move. They couldn't afford to wait much longer. Later that day, John found himself stationed at the bar, pouring drinks for a small group of businessmen who were deep in conversation. He went through the motions, but his mind was elsewhere, constantly replaying the events of the past week and searching for a solution. As he wiped down the counter, he caught sight of Rodriguez walking through the lobby. The sight of the man sent a fresh wave of anger coursing through John. Rodriguez moved through the hotel with the smug confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable, and it sickened John to think of how many lives he had destroyed in his quest for power. John's grip tightened around the glass he was holding as Rodriguez approached the front desk, speaking briefly with Sophie before they both disappeared into the staff office. He knew they were planning something. Rodriguez wouldn't be sitting idle, not after the moves he had made in recent days. He was consolidating his power, and John feared what his next step would be. But before John could dwell on it further, he felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Chris, the bartender. His face was pale, and there was a look of fear in his eyes that John hadn't seen before. "John," Chris whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "We need to talk. Now." John's heart raced as he followed Chris into the staff break room, where the other man quickly closed the door behind them. "What's going on?" John asked, his voice low. Chris ran a hand through his hair, his expression tense. "I overheard something. Rodriguez and Sophie, they're planning to fire more people, but it's not just housekeeping or front desk staff this time. They're going after anyone they think might be against them." John's stomach turned. "How do you know?" Chris swallowed hard. "I heard them talking in the hallway near the service elevators. Rodriguez is convinced someone's working against him, and Sophie's been watching the staff closely. She thinks someone's been snooping around his office." John's blood ran cold. This was worse than he had imagined. If Sophie had any inkling of what he and Emily were doing, they were in serious danger. "Did they say anything specific?" John asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Chris nodded, his hands shaking slightly. "They mentioned you, John. Sophie's been suspicious of you ever since she caught you near Rodriguez's office." John's heart pounded in his chest. Sophie was onto him. "I don't know what they're planning," Chris continued, his voice urgent, "but you need to be careful. If Rodriguez finds out what you're up to—" John nodded, his mind racing. He had to act fast. If Rodriguez and Sophie were targeting him, he couldn't afford to wait for Richard to make a move. He had to figure out a way to get the evidence to the rest of the board before it was too late. That evening, after his shift had ended, John met up with Emily again in the staff break room. She could tell immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. John quickly explained what Chris had told him, his voice low and tense. Emily's expression grew more serious with each word. "They know," Emily said quietly. "Sophie's been watching you ever since that day in Rodriguez's office. If they're planning to fire more people, you're going to be at the top of their list." John nodded grimly. "I know, but we can't wait any longer. We need to get this evidence to the rest of the board before they make their move." Emily frowned, her mind clearly racing. "But how? We can't just walk into a board meeting. And if Rodriguez finds out—" "He won't find out," John said firmly. "We'll be careful. I'll figure out a way to get the evidence into the right hands." Emily bit her lip, clearly torn. "This is risky, John. If you get caught—" "I won't," John said, though his heart pounded with the weight of the risk. "But we don't have a choice. Rodriguez is closing in, and if we don't act now, it'll be too late." Emily nodded, though her expression was filled with worry. "Just be careful, okay?" John gave her a reassuring smile, though the knot of anxiety in his chest hadn't lessened. "I will," The next day, John arrived at the hotel earlier than usual, determined to put his plan into action. He had spent the night thinking through every detail, trying to anticipate every possible outcome. The board needed to see the evidence, but he couldn't risk going through any official channel. He had to find a way to bypass Rodriguez and Sophie entirely. As John walked through the lobby, he noticed that the tension among the staff had reached a fever pitch. People moved quickly, avoiding eye contact, their faces pale with fear. Sophie had been more aggressive than ever, watching the staff like a hawk, and everyone knew that another round of firings could happen at any moment. John's heart raced as he approached the elevators. His plan was simple: find a way to get the evidence directly to Richard Collins without alerting anyone else. It was risky, but it was their only chance. Just as the elevator doors opened, John felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Sophie standing behind him, her expression cold and unreadable. "Mr. Matthews," she said, her voice clipped. "A word, if you don't mind." John's pulse quickened as he followed Sophie into the staff office. The air in the room felt thick with tension, and John had to force himself to keep his breathing steady. Sophie gestured for him to sit, her sharp eyes never leaving his face. "I've noticed that you've been spending a lot of time around the hotel lately," she said, her voice laced with suspicion. "More than usual, wouldn't you say?" John forced a casual smile. "Just trying to do my job." Sophie didn't smile. "That's good to hear. Mr. Rodriguez expects his staff to be diligent, especially in times like these." John nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the tension in the room growing with each passing second. "I hope you're not involved in anything improper," Sophie continued, her voice cold. "Mr. Rodriguez doesn't take kindly to disloyalty." John met her gaze, refusing to let his fear show. "I'm just here to work, Sophie, that's all." Sophie studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then, finally, she nodded. "Good, keep it that way." John stood, his pulse racing as he left the office. The warning was clear: Sophie was watching him closely, and any wrong move could cost him everything. But despite the threat, John's resolve only hardened. He couldn't afford to back down now. He had to get the evidence to Richard, and fast. The next few days at Mitchell Plaza Hotel were a blur of tension and paranoia. The atmosphere felt suffocating, as if the entire staff were holding their breath, waiting for the hammer to fall. Sophie's suspicions hadn't let up, and John could feel her eyes on him constantly. Every move he made was under scrutiny, and it was only a matter of time before Rodriguez made his next play. But John didn't have time to wait. He needed to act before Sophie or Rodriguez could stop him. The warning Chris had given him was still fresh in his mind. Rodriguez was convinced someone was working against him, and John knew he was running out of time before his cover was blown. It was late in the afternoon, and the hotel was quieter than usual. John stood behind the bar, mechanically wiping down glasses as his mind raced. He had been planning this moment for days, ever since his tense encounter with Sophie in the staff office. He couldn't afford to wait for Richard Collins to take action. He had to be the one to deliver the evidence directly to the board. He couldn't go through the usual channels. Rodriguez had the hotel on lockdown, and any attempt to contact the board through official means would be intercepted. But John had an idea, one that was risky, but might just work. As John finished cleaning the bar, he glanced around to make sure no one was watching. The lobby was quiet, with only a few guests lingering near the reception desk. It was now or never. John made his way to the back of the hotel, slipping through the employee corridors until he reached the service elevators. He had spent enough time working at the hotel to know its layout inside and out, and that knowledge was about to come in handy. He pressed the button for the top floor, where the board's private offices were located. It was a restricted area, off limits to most employees. But John had no intention of going through the front door. The elevator doors opened, and John stepped out into a quiet hallway. He moved quickly, keeping his head down as he passed the empty offices. His destination was at the far end of the hall, the private office of Richard Collins, the board member he had trusted with the evidence. John reached the door and hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't afford to knock. If anyone saw him here, it would raise questions he couldn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to Richard, the text simple but urgent. "I need to see you. It's about Rodriguez. Meet me outside the hotel." He sent the message and waited, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally, after what felt like hours, his phone buzzed with a reply. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." John breathed a sigh of relief, slipping his phone back into his pocket. Now all he had to do was get out of the building without being noticed. John made his way back down to the lobby, his pulse quickening as he approached the front doors. He had almost made it to the exit when he spotted Sophie standing near the reception desk, speaking with a guest. Her eyes flicked toward him, and for a moment, John thought she might call him over. But then she turned back to the guest, her attention elsewhere. John exhaled softly and slipped out of the hotel, the cool evening air hitting his face as he stepped onto the sidewalk. He made his way to the side of the building, out of sight from the main entrance, and waited for Richard to arrive. The minutes ticked by slowly, and John's nerves were on edge. Every sound, the hum of passing cars, the distant chatter of pedestrians, felt magnified, as if the entire world was holding its breath alongside him. He kept glancing back toward the hotel, half expecting to see Rodriguez or Sophie storming out to confront him. But finally, after what felt like hours, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and John saw Richard Collins in the driver's seat, his expression serious. John quickly walked over and opened the passenger door, sliding into the car. "Thanks for coming," John said, his voice low. Richard glanced at him, his face tight with concern. "What's going on? You said it's about Rodriguez." John nodded, pulling out his phone. "I have proof, financial records, transactions that don't add up. Rodriguez has been stealing from the hotel, redirecting funds into private accounts, and he's been using Sophie to cover it up." Richard's eyes widened as John showed him the evidence. "How long has this been going on?" "For months," John said, his voice tense. "Maybe longer. He's been cutting corners, firing staff, and manipulating the board. The hotel's falling apart, and he's pocketing the money." Richard stared at the screen for a long moment, his jaw clenched. "I knew something was wrong. I've heard complaints from some of the staff, but I didn't realize it was this bad." John nodded, feeling a surge of relief that Richard was finally seeing the full scope of the problem. "We need to act fast. Rodriguez is already getting suspicious, and if he finds out that we're onto him..." Richard looked at him sharply. "He won't. I'll call an emergency board meeting tomorrow. We'll confront Rodriguez with the evidence, and he won't have a leg to stand on." John felt a wave of relief wash over him. This was it. After weeks of living in fear, of watching Rodriguez destroy everything his father had built, they were finally going to take him down. But the relief was short-lived. Just as Richard was about to speak again, John's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his heart sinking as he saw a message from Emily. "Rodriguez is looking for you. Sophie thinks you're hiding something." John's blood ran cold. He knew what that meant. Rodriguez and Sophie were closing in on him. He didn't have much time. "Richard," John said quickly, "I have to go. If Rodriguez finds me before the board can act..." Richard nodded, his expression grim. "Go. I'll take care of things from here." John nodded, slipping out of the car and making his way back toward the hotel. His mind raced as he walked, trying to figure out his next move. He couldn't afford to stay at the hotel any longer. It was only a matter of time before Rodriguez or Sophie found him, but he couldn't leave either. He had to stay close, had to make sure that the board followed through on their promise to confront Rodriguez. Everything depended on it. The next morning, John arrived at the hotel with a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. He knew the board was meeting today, and Richard had promised to present the evidence. But until that meeting happened, John was still in danger. He kept his head down, moving quietly through the staff corridors as he prepared for his shift. Every interaction felt charged with tension, and every glance from Sophie or Rodriguez felt like a threat. By mid-morning, the tension in the hotel was palpable. John had overheard whispers from other staff members. Something was happening, but no one seemed to know exactly what. All they knew was that Rodriguez had been called into a meeting with the board. John's pulse quickened as he heard the news. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. He made his way to the break room, his mind racing. If the board confronted Rodriguez with the evidence, it would all be over. The corruption would be exposed, and the hotel could finally be saved. But John wasn't naive. He knew Rodriguez wouldn't go down without a fight. As the minutes ticked by, John waited in the break room, his heart pounding in his chest. Every second felt like an eternity, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Then, just as he was about to leave the room, the door burst open. It was Emily, her face pale with fear. "John," she said breathlessly, "Rodriguez knows. He's coming for you." The moment Emily burst into the break room, her face pale and breathless, John's heart dropped. "Rodriguez knows," she repeated, her voice shaking with urgency. "He's coming for you, John." John's mind raced, his pulse quickening as he processed the gravity of her words. Rodriguez had figured it out. He knew John wasn't just another employee, and now he was coming to confront him. "How?" John asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What did he find out?" Emily swallowed hard, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected Rodriguez to walk through the door at any moment. "I overheard Sophie talking to him. She's been watching you ever since that day in his office. She said you've been acting suspicious, and now they're convinced you're the one trying to expose them." John felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. He had known this moment was coming, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. He had thought he still had time to stay under the radar, time to let the board take action. But now, it was too late. "They're going to try to pin everything on you," Emily continued, her voice urgent. "Rodriguez is furious. He's convinced you're trying to take him down, and he's not going to let you get away with it." John clenched his fists, his mind racing. He needed to think, to figure out his next move, but every instinct was telling him to run. If Rodriguez confronted him now, it would all be over. There was no way he could talk his way out of this. "What do I do?" John asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with fear and determination. "You need to leave the hotel, now. If Rodriguez finds you here, he'll make sure you're fired. Or worse." John's heart pounded in his chest. Leaving the hotel meant abandoning the fight, but staying meant certain disaster. He couldn't let Rodriguez destroy everything his father had built, but he couldn't fight him if he was fired or worse. "I can't just walk away," John said, his voice filled with frustration. "I've worked too hard to get this far. The board has the evidence. Richard's going to confront Rodriguez. I need to be here when it happens." Emily shook her head. "John, you don't understand. Rodriguez doesn't care about the board. He's going to deal with you first. He'll bury the evidence before anyone even knows it exists." John knew she was right. Rodriguez had already proven he was ruthless, and if he was coming for John, there was no telling how far he'd go to protect his empire. But John couldn't leave. Not yet. "I need to find a way to buy some time," John said, his mind racing. "If I can stay out of sight for a few hours, maybe, just maybe, I can hold out long enough for Richard to confront him." Emily frowned, clearly torn. "But where will you go? Rodriguez and Sophie are watching everyone." John glanced around the break room, his thoughts spinning as he considered his options. The hotel was massive, with dozens of rooms, hallways, and staff areas that Rodriguez rarely visited. If he could find somewhere to hide, just long enough to wait for Richard to act. "The service areas," John said, his voice quiet but certain. "Rodriguez never goes back there. I can hide in one of the storage rooms until I hear from Richard." Emily hesitated, worry etched on her face. "Are you sure that's safe?" "It's my only option," John replied, his mind already made up. "I just need a few hours. If I can lay low, Richard will handle the rest." Emily nodded, though she still looked unsure. "All right, I'll cover for you as much as I can. If anyone asks, I'll say you've been assigned to a different shift." John gave her a grateful look. "Thank you, Emily. I don't know what I'd do without you." Emily managed a small, tense smile. "Just be careful, okay? Rodriguez is dangerous." "I will," John promised. "And when this is over, we'll make sure he's the one who's gone, not me." John wasted no time. As soon as Emily left the break room, he slipped out the back and made his way through the employee corridors, moving quickly but quietly. He passed a few other staff members along the way, but none of them paid him any attention. Everyone was too focused on their own work, too nervous about Sophie's constant surveillance to question what he was doing. John's heart pounded as he reached the service elevators at the rear of the hotel. He pressed the button, glancing over his shoulder to make sure he wasn't being followed. Every second felt like an eternity, and he could practically feel the walls closing in around him. Finally, the elevator doors slid open, and John stepped inside, pressing the button for the basement. The service areas were a maze of storage rooms, laundry facilities, and maintenance corridors, places where the regular hotel staff rarely ventured, and where Rodriguez would never think to look for him. As the elevator descended, John's mind raced. He had no idea how long he'd have to hide, or if Richard had even managed to confront Rodriguez yet. All he could do was hope that the board would act quickly, that Richard would force Rodriguez to face the consequences of his actions before it was too late. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and John stepped out into the dimly lit basement. The air down here was cooler, with the faint hum of machinery in the background. It was quiet, almost eerie, but it was exactly what John needed. He made his way through the maze of corridors, finally reaching a small, unused storage room tucked away in the back. The room was filled with old linens and cleaning supplies, but it was secluded enough that no one would think to check it. John stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His heart still pounded in his chest, but at least he was out of sight. Now, all he had to do was wait. The hours ticked by slowly, and the tension in the air seemed to grow thicker with each passing minute. John paced the small storage room, his nerves frayed. He couldn't stop thinking about what was happening upstairs, what Rodriguez and Sophie were planning, whether Richard had confronted them yet, whether it was already too late. Every sound outside the room made his heart race. Footsteps in the hallway, the distant rumble of the service elevators, each noise sent a jolt of fear through him, making him wonder if Rodriguez had found him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, John's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Richard. "Meeting's over. Rodriguez knows it's time." John's stomach dropped as he read the words. Rodriguez knew. The board had confronted him, and now everything was out in the open. But what did Richard mean by "it's time"? Was the board going to take action against Rodriguez, or had something else happened? John didn't have time to think about it. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Emily. "Rodriguez is looking for you. He's furious. Be careful." John's heart pounded. He had expected Rodriguez to come after him, but now that the board knew the truth, things were different. Rodriguez was desperate, and desperate people did dangerous things. John slipped out of the storage room, moving quickly but quietly through the basement corridors. He needed to get out of the hotel, but he knew Rodriguez would be looking for him everywhere. His only chance was to stay one step ahead. As he reached the service elevators, John pressed the button and waited, his pulse quickening. Every second felt like an eternity, and he kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting Rodriguez to appear at any moment. The elevator doors slid open, and John stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. He knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, he would have to confront Rodriguez, and when that happened, he needed to be ready. The ride up to the lobby felt like the longest elevator ride of John Mitchell's life. His heart raced in his chest, every beat loud and echoing in his ears, as the quiet hum of the service elevator filled the small space. Rodriguez was looking for him, furious, desperate, and now fully aware of the board's confrontation. There was no telling what the man was capable of, now that his empire was crumbling beneath him. John's phone buzzed again, a second message from Emily. "He's on the warpath, John. He's been tearing through the hotel. looking for you. I'm trying to keep him distracted, but it won't last long." John swallowed hard, his mind racing. He was running out of time. He had expected Rodriguez to retaliate after the board meeting, but not this quickly. Now, every second counted. The elevator doors slid open, and John stepped into the lobby, his senses on high alert. He moved cautiously, keeping his head down as he walked past the reception desk. The hotel was bustling with guests as usual, but there was a tension in the air that wasn't there before. Staff members glanced around nervously, their faces pale and drawn, as if they were all waiting for the storm to hit. John knew it was only a matter of time before Rodriguez found him, and when that happened, there would be no more hiding. As he walked through the lobby, John kept an eye on every corner, every exit. He needed a plan, some way to stay ahead of Rodriguez until Richard could finish what they'd started. But he also knew that running wouldn't solve the problem forever. Eventually, he would have to confront Rodriguez head-on. The thought sent a chill down his spine. John slipped into the staff corridors, moving quickly as he made his way toward the rear exit of the hotel. He wasn't sure where he was going. He just knew he needed to get out of the lobby before Rodriguez spotted him. The tension was unbearable, like the air was crackling with electricity, and John felt like every step he took brought him closer to the inevitable. But just as he rounded a corner, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Mitchell!" John's blood ran cold. He turned slowly, his heart pounding, to see Rodriguez standing at the other end of the hallway, his face twisted in rage. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. Rodriguez's eyes were wild, his fists clenched at his sides as he took a step toward John. The fury in his expression was palpable, and John could tell that this wasn't just about the board meeting anymore. This was personal. "You think you can ruin me?" Rodriguez growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything I've built?" John stood his ground, his mind racing. There was no point in denying anything now. Rodriguez knew the truth, and there was no turning back. But John also knew that if he backed down now, Rodriguez would destroy him. "This isn't about ruining you," John said, his voice steady despite the fear tightening in his chest. "This is about saving the hotel. You've been stealing from the company, firing good people, and running this place into the ground." Rodriguez's face contorted with anger. "You don't know anything about how this business works. You think your little stunt with the board is going to change anything. You're just like your father, weak, too soft to do what needs to be done." The words hit John like a slap in the face. He had spent years trying to live up to his father's legacy, trying to prove that he could handle the responsibility of running the hotel. But hearing Rodriguez insult his father's memory sparked a fire in John that he hadn't felt before. "You don't get to talk about my father," John said coldly, his eyes narrowing. "He built this hotel from the ground up. You're the one who's tearing it apart." Rodriguez took another step forward, his expression darkening. "Your father was a fool. He thought he could run this place by being nice, by treating everyone like family. But that's not how business works. This hotel needed someone strong enough to make the hard decisions. That's why I'm in charge, not you." John felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. Rodriguez was trying to goad him, to make him lose control. But John knew that if he let his emotions get the best of him, Rodriguez would win. "This is over, Rodriguez," John said, his voice firm. "The board has the evidence. They know what you've been doing, and they're going to take action." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, John saw a flicker of fear in his expression. But it was gone just as quickly, replaced by cold determination. "You think the board is going to save you?" Rodriguez sneered. "I've been running this place for years. I know every trick, every loophole. By the time the board gets around to making a decision, it'll be too late for you. I'll make sure of it." John clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He knew Rodriguez was dangerous, but hearing the man speak so openly about his plan sent a chill down his spine. Rodriguez wasn't just a corrupt manager. He was a ruthless manipulator, willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. But John couldn't back down. Not now. "I'm not afraid of you," John said quietly, his voice steady, "and I'm not going to let you destroy my father's legacy." For a moment, Rodriguez's face twisted with rage, and John thought the man might actually attack him. But then, to John's surprise, Rodriguez let out a cold, bitter laugh. "You're a fool, Mitchell," Rodriguez said, shaking his head. "You don't have the guts to do what needs to be done. That's why you'll lose." With that, Rodriguez turned on his heel and stormed down the hallway, his footsteps echoing against the walls. John stood there for a moment, his heart still racing, trying to process what had just happened. He had expected Rodriguez to lash out, to try to take him down right then and there, but instead, the man had walked away, leaving John with a sense of foreboding that he couldn't shake. Rodriguez wasn't giving up. He was planning something that John couldn't see yet, and whatever it wasn't going to be good. John made his way back to the staff break room, his mind spinning. The confrontation with Rodriguez had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He had thought that once the board had the evidence, it would all be over, that Rodriguez would be exposed and the hotel would be saved. But now, John wasn't so sure. Rodriguez was a master manipulator, and he had been running the hotel for years. He knew every loophole, every weakness, and he wasn't going to go down without a fight. And with Sophie still at his side, willing to do whatever it took to protect him, John knew that the battle was far from over. When he entered the break room, he found Emily waiting for him, her expression anxious. "What happened?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. John sat down heavily in the chair across from her, running a hand through his hair. "I confronted him. He knows everything, and he's not going to give up without a fight." Emily's face paled. "What do we do now?" John stared at the table for a long moment, his mind racing. He knew they couldn't wait for the board to act. They had to take matters into their own hands. Rodriguez was planning something, and if they didn't act fast, it would be too late. "We need to be one step ahead of him," John said finally, his voice firm. "He's not going to go down without a fight, but we can't let him destroy this place. We need to find out what he's planning, and we need to stop him before he can do any more damage." Emily nodded, though her expression remained tense. "But how? He's already suspicious of us. If we get caught, we won't get caught," John said, though his heart was still pounding. "We'll be careful. We have to be." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with worry. "I'm with you, John, but this is dangerous. Rodriguez isn't just going to walk away." John nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He knew she was right. Rodriguez wasn't going to give up, and neither could they. But no matter what, John wasn't going to let Rodriguez win. Not after everything he had done to the hotel, to the staff, to his father's legacy. It was time to fight back. John Mitchell had never felt pressure like this before. As he sat in the dimly lit staff break room, his mind raced with everything that had unfolded in the past few days. Rodriguez had been exposed to the board, but the man's power over the hotel was far from broken. His confrontation with Rodriguez still echoed in his mind. Those cold, menacing words that felt less like threats and more like promises. John's instincts told him that Rodriguez was planning something big. The man was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. John knew that if they didn't act quickly, Rodriguez might find a way to turn the situation to his advantage, despite the evidence against him. Emily sat across from him, her fingers nervously tapping on the table. She hadn't spoken much since John told her about the confrontation, but the worry in her eyes was clear. She knew just as well as John that they were running out of time. "We need to figure out what Rodriguez is planning," John said quietly, breaking the silence. "He's not just going to wait for the board to take action. He's going to make his move before they can stop him." Emily nodded, though her expression remained tense. "But how do we find out? He's already suspicious of us, and Sophie is watching everyone closely. If we make one wrong move..." John leaned forward, his mind racing as he considered their options. "We need to get close to him. There has to be someone in his inner circle, someone who knows what he's planning." Emily frowned, her brow furrowed in thought. "What about Sophie? She's been by his side since the beginning. If anyone knows his next move, It's her. John considered this, his thoughts turning to the sharp-eyed head of personnel. Sophie had been Rodriguez's right hand throughout the entire operation, covering for him and protecting his interests. If they could find a way to learn what she knew, they might be able to stay ahead of Rodriguez. It's risky, John said slowly, but you're right. Sophie knows everything. If we can get to her. John, Emily interrupted, her voice hesitant. There's something you should know. John looked at her, noticing the apprehension in her expression. What is it? Emily glanced around the room, as if making sure no one was listening. I overheard something earlier. One of the housekeeping staff was talking to Sophie, and she mentioned something about a meeting Rodriguez is having tomorrow night. John's pulse quickened. A meeting? With who? I'm not sure, Emily admitted, her voice quiet. But it sounded important. Sophie told the housekeeper to make sure no one else knew about it. Whatever it is, they're keeping it quiet. John's mind raced. This was the break they needed. Rodriguez was planning something, and this secret meeting could be the key to finding out what. If they could figure out what Rodriguez was up to before it happened, they might be able to stop him in time. We need to find out where this meeting is happening, John said, his voice filled with urgency. If Rodriguez is planning something big, this is our chance to stop him. Emily nodded, though her expression remained cautious. But how do we get close enough without being caught? Sophie's been watching the staff like a hawk. John thought for a moment, his mind spinning with possibilities. They couldn't just follow Rodriguez or Sophie directly. That would be too obvious, and it would blow their cover. But if they could gather enough information about the meeting beforehand, they might be able to get into position without raising suspicion. I'll talk to some of the staff, John said finally. Maybe they've overheard something else. If we can figure out where and when the meeting is happening, we can get there before Rodriguez knows what's going on. Emily nodded, her resolve hardening. All right, I'll keep an eye on Sophie. If she does anything unusual, I'll let you know. John felt a surge of determination. They were getting closer. This was their chance to stop Rodriguez before he could make his next move. But they had to be smart, and they had to move fast. The rest of the day passed in a blur of quiet conversations and tense glances. John kept his ear to the ground, speaking with a few trusted staff members who had been loyal to his father's vision for the hotel. Most of them were afraid to talk. Rodriguez's reign of intimidation had silenced many, but one or two were willing to share what little they knew. A housekeeper named Maria, who had been working at Mitchell Plaza for over a decade, pulled John aside during her break. Her face was etched with worry, but she spoke in a low voice, her gaze darting around the room to make sure no one was watching. I don't know much, Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper, but I heard Sophie talking to one of the other managers about a late-night meeting in one of the private suites on the top floor. It's happening tomorrow, but no one's supposed to know. John nodded, his heart racing. The top floor of the hotel was reserved for high-profile guests and VIP meetings, discreet, luxurious, and far from the prying eyes of the regular staff. If Rodriguez was holding a meeting there, it had to be important. Did you hear anything else? John asked, his voice tense with anticipation. Maria shook her head. No, but they've been acting strange lately. Sophie's been giving orders to the staff to keep certain areas clear tomorrow night. Something's going on, John. John thanked her, his mind racing as he processed the information. A private meeting on the top floor, with specific areas being cleared of staff. It was all coming together. Whatever Rodriguez was planning, it was happening tomorrow night, and it was happening in secret. He needed to be there. That evening, John and Emily met in the staff break room once again, their faces grim with determination. John quickly relayed what he had learned from Maria, and Emily's expression grew even more serious. A private meeting on the top floor, Emily said, her voice laced with concern. That sounds big, John. If Rodriguez is going to make his move, it's happening tomorrow. John nodded, his thoughts spinning. We need to get up there. If we can find out what they're planning, we might be able to stop it before it's too late. Emily bit her lip, clearly thinking through the risks. But how do we get up there without being seen? The top floor is off limits to staff unless they're specifically assigned to it. John thought for a moment, then an idea struck him. What if we pose as part of the cleaning staff? We'll have access to the entire floor, and no one will question why we're there. Emily frowned, her brow furrowed in thought. It's risky. If Rodriguez or Sophie see us... They won't, John said firmly. We'll be careful. We'll wait until the meeting starts, then slip in quietly. If we stay out of sight, we can listen to what they're planning without them even knowing we're there. Emily still looked uncertain, but she nodded. All right, I'll get us the uniforms. But we need to be extra careful, John. If they catch us... They won't, John said, though he felt the weight of the risk pressing down on him. This is our only chance. We can't let Rodriguez get away with whatever he's planning. The next day passed in a blur of tension and quiet anticipation. John and Emily went about their regular duties, careful not to draw any attention to themselves as they prepared for the night ahead. The hotel's staff was on edge, with whispers circulating about a big event happening that evening, though no one seemed to know the full details. By the time the sun began to set, John and Emily were ready. Dressed in the uniforms of the hotel's cleaning staff, they blended in perfectly with the rest of the employees. The plan was simple: wait until the meeting began, then slip onto the top floor and find a way to eavesdrop on Rodriguez's conversation. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting, John's heart raced. Every second felt like a countdown, and the weight of what they were about to do pressed heavily on his shoulders. This was it, the moment that could determine the fate of the hotel and possibly their own futures. Just after 10 p.m., John and Emily made their way to the service elevator, keeping their heads down as they rode up to the top floor. The tension between them was palpable, neither of them speaking as they mentally prepared for what was about to happen. The elevator doors opened, and John and Emily stepped out into the quiet hallway of the top floor. The lights were dim, and the luxurious carpets muffled their footsteps as they moved silently toward the suite where the meeting was being held. As they approached the door, John could hear faint voices from inside. Rodriguez's voice, low and firm, followed by another voice he didn't recognize. His heart pounded in his chest as he pressed his ear against the door, listening intently. This was it, the moment of truth. John Mitchell pressed his ear firmly against the door, straining to make out the voices inside the suite. The hallway was eerily quiet, and every second that passed seemed to stretch on endlessly. Beside him, Emily stood with her back against the wall, her breath shallow and her eyes fixed on the door, ready to react at a moment's notice. The voices inside the suite were muffled, but John could pick out Rodriguez's distinctive tone, low, controlled, but with an edge of frustration. Whoever he was speaking to had a calm, measured voice, someone who seemed unbothered by the tension in the room. John couldn't identify the second voice, but it was clear that this person was important. The stakes were higher than he'd imagined. "We need to move quickly," Rodriguez's voice said, his tone sharp. "The board is getting too close. Mitchell's interference is already causing problems. If we wait any longer, it'll be too late." John's heart pounded. Rodriguez was still planning something that would let him slip away, even after the board had confronted him. "We have options," the second voice replied, calm and assured, "but it will require cooperation from certain key players. If we're going to pull this off, we need to ensure there are no loose ends." Loose ends. John's blood ran cold as the words echoed in his mind. He was the loose end, and Rodriguez knew it. There was a brief pause, and then Rodriguez spoke again, his voice quieter, but no less determined. "What about the staff? They've been loyal so far, but Mitchell's been stirring up trouble. If we're not careful, they'll turn against us. We need to make sure they stay in line." "We'll deal with that," the other man replied smoothly. "I've already spoken to Sophie. She'll take care of anyone who becomes a problem." John exchanged a glance with Emily, his chest tightening. Sophie, of course. She was the enforcer, the one who had been keeping everyone in check while Rodriguez pulled the strings. They were both more dangerous than he had realized. "We can't afford any mistakes," Rodriguez continued, his voice tense. "This has to be handled quietly. The board can't know what we're doing until it's too late." John's pulse quickened. Whatever Rodriguez and this mysterious partner were planning, it was clear that they were preparing to make their final move. And if the board didn't act soon, it would all be over. "I've already taken care of the financials," the second man said, his voice filled with a cold confidence. "The money is in place. Once we secure the transfer, we'll be able to walk away clean. No one will know where the funds went." John's heart pounded in his chest. The financials, they were planning to steal from the hotel, siphoning off funds and disappearing before anyone could trace the money. And once they were gone, Mitchell Plaza would be left to crumble under the weight of their corruption. It was worse than John had imagined. This wasn't just about saving the hotel, it was about stopping Rodriguez and his partner from getting away with everything they had stolen. They were planning to drain the hotel's accounts and disappear, leaving the board and the staff to deal with the aftermath. John had heard enough. He stepped back from the door, motioning for Emily to follow him. She looked at him, her expression tense but determined, and together they moved silently back down the hallway toward the service elevator. "We need to stop them," John whispered as they reached the elevator. "They're going to take the money and run. If we don't act now, it'll be too late." Emily nodded, her face pale but resolute. "But how? They've already got everything in place. We don't even know who Rodriguez's partner is." John clenched his fists, his mind racing. She was right. Without knowing the identity of Rodriguez's partner, it would be nearly impossible to track the stolen funds. And with Sophie watching over the staff, any attempt to confront Rodriguez directly could end in disaster. But they had to do something. "We need to get to Richard," John said finally. "He's the only one who can stop this. If we can get the board to freeze the accounts, Rodriguez won't be able to make the transfer." Emily hesitated, her eyes filled with worry. "But what if Rodriguez finds out what we're doing? He's already suspicious. If he catches us..." John shook his head, forcing himself to stay focused. "We don't have a choice. This is our only chance." Emily looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, let's go." The ride down to the lobby felt agonizingly slow. Every floor they passed, every creak of the elevator made John's nerves tighten. He knew that time was running out. Rodriguez and his partner were planning to move quickly, and if they didn't stop them soon, it would all be over. When the elevator finally reached the lobby, John and Emily stepped out, keeping their heads down as they made their way toward the exit. The hotel was quieter than usual, the late hour leaving the lobby mostly empty, but John couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They stepped outside into the cool night air, the city lights casting a pale glow over the streets. John quickly pulled out his phone and sent a message to Richard. "We need to talk. It's urgent. Meet me outside the hotel." Emily stood beside him, her arms crossed as she glanced nervously up at the hotel. "Do you think Rodriguez knows we were listening?" John shook his head, though he wasn't entirely sure. "I don't think so, but we can't take any chances." A few minutes later, a black sedan pulled up to the curb, and Richard stepped out. His face was tense, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a look of concern. "What's going on?" Richard asked as he approached them, his voice low. John quickly explained everything: Rodriguez's secret meeting, the plan to siphon off the hotel's funds, and the looming transfer that would leave the hotel in financial ruin. Richard's expression darkened as he listened, his jaw clenched. "This is worse than I thought," Richard muttered, shaking his head. "I knew Rodriguez was corrupt, but I didn't think he'd go this far." "We need to act fast," John said, his voice urgent. "If they make the transfer, it's over. We need to freeze the accounts before they can take the money." Richard nodded, his expression grim. "I'll call an emergency board meeting. We'll freeze the accounts immediately. Rodriguez won't be able to touch a dime." John felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. Even if they stopped the transfer, Rodriguez was still dangerous. He wouldn't go down without a fight, and John knew that they hadn't seen the last of him. What about Rodriguez's partner? Emily asked, her voice tense. "We still don't know who he's working with." Richard frowned, his brow furrowed in thought. "I've been looking into it, but I haven't found anything yet. Whoever it is, they're good at staying hidden." John clenched his fists, frustration building in his chest. They were so close, but the mystery partner was still a shadow, lurking in the background, pulling the strings alongside Rodriguez. "We'll figure it out," Richard said, his voice firm. "But first, we need to stop Rodriguez. Once the accounts are frozen, he'll have no way out." John nodded, though a sense of unease still gnawed at him. He knew Rodriguez wouldn't go down easily, and there was no telling what the man would do once he realized his plan had been foiled. "We need to be careful," John said quietly. "Rodriguez isn't just going to walk away." Richard met his gaze, his expression serious. "We'll be ready." The next morning, John arrived at the hotel early, his nerves on edge as he prepared for what was to come. He knew that Richard had called the emergency board meeting, and by now the hotel's accounts would have been frozen. Rodriguez's plan to steal the funds had been stopped, but that didn't mean the fight was over. As John walked through the lobby, he noticed the tension in the air had reached a fever pitch. Staff members moved quickly, their faces tight with worry, and the usual hum of hotel activity had been replaced by an uneasy silence. It was clear that something was about to happen. John made his way to the staff break room, where he found Emily waiting for him. She looked just as tense as he felt, her arms crossed as she paced the room. "Did you hear anything?" John asked, his voice low. Emily shook her head. "No, but everyone's on edge. Rodriguez hasn't shown up yet, and people are starting to talk." John frowned, his mind racing. Rodriguez was never late. The fact that he hadn't shown up yet was a bad sign. "We need to be ready," John said quietly. "Rodriguez knows his plan failed. He's going to try something, and we need to be prepared." Emily nodded, though her expression remained tense. "What do you think he'll do?" "I don't know," John admitted. "But whatever it is, we can't let him win." As the morning wore on, the tension in the hotel only grew. Staff members whispered among themselves, and guests seemed to pick up on the unease in the air. John kept his head down, his eyes constantly scanning the lobby for any sign of Rodriguez. Finally, just before noon, John spotted him. Rodriguez stepped out of a black car in front of the hotel, his face set in a grim expression. He moved with purpose as he walked through the lobby, his eyes cold and calculating. It was clear that he knew his plan had failed, but there was something else in his expression, something dangerous. John watched as Rodriguez disappeared into his office, the door closing behind him with a soft click. This wasn't over. Not yet. John Mitchell sat at a small table in the corner of the hotel's break room, his mind racing with the events of the past few days. The accounts had been frozen, effectively halting Rodriguez's plan to siphon off the hotel's funds. But John knew that wasn't the end of it. Rodriguez wasn't the type to simply walk away after a failed scheme. The man was dangerous, ruthless when backed into a corner, and John had no doubt that Rodriguez was already preparing his next move. Emily sat across from him, her face tight with tension. She'd been quiet since they received the news that the board had frozen the accounts, and John could tell she was just as on edge as he was. The victory felt hollow, like a calm before the storm. Rodriguez hadn't made any public moves yet, but everyone at the hotel knew something was coming. "He's not going to give up," Emily said quietly, breaking the silence. "Rodriguez is too deep into this to just walk away. He'll fight back." John nodded, his jaw clenched. "I know, and we need to be ready when he does." Emily leaned forward, her voice low and filled with urgency. "But how? We stopped him from taking the money, but he still has power over the staff. Sophie's still by his side, and they're watching everyone closely. If we make one wrong move..." John rubbed his temples, trying to think through their options. The accounts were frozen, but Rodriguez still had his grip on the day-to-day operations of the hotel. He could still intimidate the staff, still use Sophie to keep everyone in line. And John knew that if Rodriguez decided to retaliate, things could get ugly fast. "We need to expose him completely," John said finally, his voice steady, The board has the financial evidence, but they don't see the full picture. They don't know about the threats, the fear he's instilled in the staff. If we can show them what Rodriguez has been doing behind the scenes, they won't just freeze the accounts, they'll fire him. Emily looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. But how do we prove that? The staff is too scared to speak up, and Sophie's covering for him. John thought for a moment, the pieces slowly falling into place in his mind. He knew they had to act fast. Rodriguez was likely planning something in response to the frozen accounts, and if they didn't move quickly, he might find a way to turn things back in his favor. There's only one way, John said quietly. We need to record him. If we can catch Rodriguez threatening the staff or talking about his plans, we'll have all the evidence we need. Emily's eyes widened. You want to record him? That's risky, John. If he finds out... He won't, John said, his voice firm. We'll be careful, but it's the only way to take him down once and for all. Emily hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing the risks in her mind. But finally, she nodded. Okay, I'll help. But we need to be smart about this. John smiled faintly, grateful for her support. We will be. The rest of the day passed in a tense blur. John and Emily went about their usual tasks, trying to blend in with the other staff members while keeping their plan firmly in mind. John could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Rodriguez had gone silent since the accounts were frozen, but John knew it was only a matter of time before the man made his next move. By the time John's shift ended, he had already formulated a plan. He knew that Rodriguez wouldn't be reckless. Not yet. The man was too calculating to make a move without first assessing his options. That meant Rodriguez would likely be meeting with Sophie or some of his other allies soon, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. And when he did, John would be ready. That evening, after most of the guests had gone to bed and the hotel's lobby had emptied out, John met Emily in the staff break room. They had both changed out of their uniforms, dressed in casual clothes that wouldn't attract attention. Emily carried a small voice recorder in her hand, her expression serious. "Are you sure this is going to work?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John nodded, though his heart pounded in his chest. "It has to. We'll stay out of sight, and we'll be careful. If Rodriguez says anything incriminating, we'll have the evidence we need." Emily still looked uncertain, but she didn't argue. Instead, she followed John as they made their way toward the service elevators at the back of the hotel. The plan was simple: hide in one of the staff-only areas near Rodriguez's office and wait for him to meet with Sophie or one of his other allies. If they could catch him discussing his plans or threatening someone, they would have everything they needed to bring him down. The service elevator doors slid open, and John and Emily stepped inside, their nerves on edge. As the elevator ascended to the top floor, John kept his thoughts focused, running through the plan in his mind. They had to be careful. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. The elevator doors opened, and John led Emily down a quiet hallway toward Rodriguez's office. The hallway was dimly lit, and the soft carpet muffled their footsteps as they moved silently through the shadows. When they reached the corner near Rodriguez's office, they ducked behind a large potted plant, staying out of sight while still close enough to hear any conversations that might take place. John's heart raced as he glanced at Emily, who held the voice recorder tightly in her hand. They were both tense, every sound in the hallway magnified by the silence around them. Minutes passed, the tension building with every second. John was beginning to wonder if Rodriguez would even show up when they heard the soft click of a door opening. John froze, his breath catching in his throat. He heard footsteps approaching, 2 sets of footsteps. One of them was unmistakably Rodriguez's, the heavy, purposeful steps that John had come to recognize over the past few weeks. The other set was lighter, more measured, likely Sophie. The two of them stopped just outside Rodriguez's office, their voices low but clear enough for John and Emily to hear. "I can't believe the board froze the accounts," Rodriguez muttered, his voice filled with barely contained anger. "They're acting faster than I thought." "They're nervous," Sophie replied, her tone calm. "Mitchell's been stirring things up, and now the board thinks they can push us out. But they don't have all the information. We can still control the narrative." Rodriguez let out a low growl of frustration. "We're running out of time, Sophie. We need to find another way to move the funds. If the board gets a full investigation underway, it's over." John's pulse quickened as he exchanged a glance with Emily. This was it. Proof that Rodriguez was still trying to steal the hotel's money, even after the accounts had been frozen. "We'll have to act quickly," Sophie said quietly. "The staff is getting restless. They're starting to realize something's wrong. If they turn on us—" "They won't," Rodriguez snapped. "I'll make sure of it." John's stomach churned as he heard Rodriguez's words. The man was doubling down on his threats, trying to keep the staff in line through fear. John felt a surge of anger as he listened to the cold, calculating tone in Rodriguez's voice. The man had no remorse, no hesitation. He was willing to destroy everything and everyone in his path to get what he wanted. "Mitchell is the real problem," Rodriguez continued, his voice low and menacing. "He's been meddling in this from the start, and now the board is listening to him. We need to find a way to neutralize him before he causes any more damage." John felt a chill run down his spine. Rodriguez's words were laced with venom, and it was clear that the man saw him as the biggest obstacle to his plan. Neutralize him. John had no doubt that Rodriguez meant to do whatever it took to silence him once and for all. "We'll take care of Mitchell," Sophie said, her voice cold and confident. "I'll make sure he doesn't interfere again." John's heart pounded in his chest. He and Emily had heard enough. He gave her a quick nod, and she pressed the button on the voice recorder, stopping the recording. They had what they needed: Rodriguez's plan to move the funds, his threats against the staff, and his intent to target John personally. They had the proof. Now all they had to do was get it to the board before Rodriguez could make his next move. John Mitchell's pulse quickened as he and Emily rushed back down the service elevator, the soft hum of the machinery the only sound cutting through the silence between them. In Emily's hand was the voice recorder, containing the damning evidence they had just captured. The words of Rodriguez still echoed in John's mind, his cold, calculated plans to move the funds and his chilling threats against the staff and John himself. Rodriguez had crossed the line, and now John had the proof to take him down. "We did it," Emily whispered, her voice tight with a mixture of relief and tension. "We got what we needed." John nodded, but his heart still raced. They had the evidence, but the hardest part was still ahead, getting it into the hands of the board before Rodriguez found out what they had done. They couldn't afford any mistakes now. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. The elevator doors slid open, and John stepped out into the quiet, dimly lit hallway of the hotel's lower floor. It was late, and most of the staff had either gone home or were working the night shift, leaving the hotel eerily still. John glanced at Emily, and they shared a brief, determined look. "We need to get this to Richard," John said quietly. "If we move fast, we can have the board listen to the recording first thing in the morning." Emily nodded, clutching the recorder tightly in her hand. "What about Rodriguez? He's going to know something's wrong when we don't show up for our shifts tomorrow." John clenched his fists, his mind racing. Rodriguez would know, there was no doubt about that. But by the time he realized what was happening, it would be too late. "We'll be gone before he notices," John said, though the knot of anxiety in his chest didn't loosen. "If we can get the recording to the board before he realizes, there's nothing he can do." They exited the hotel through a side door, the cool night air hitting them like a rush of clarity. The city's faint sounds buzzed around them, distant car engines, the hum of streetlights, but John's mind was too focused to notice any of it. Every step they took away from the hotel felt like progress, but also brought with it the weight of what could happen if Rodriguez realized they were gone. John pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to Richard. "We have the evidence. We need to meet now. It can't wait until morning." They waited in the shadows of the street corner, hearts pounding as they anxiously awaited a response. Minutes passed. the silence between them thick with tension. Then, John's phone buzzed. "Meet me at my apartment. I'll be there in 20 minutes." John breathed a sigh of relief, though the tension in his chest didn't fade. They had to move quickly. Every minute they spent out in the open felt dangerous, like they were exposed, vulnerable. "Let's go," John said, leading the way toward the street where they could catch a cab. The ride to Richard's apartment felt longer than it actually was, even though it was just across town. John stared out the window, his mind replaying everything that had happened. He had come to the hotel undercover, hoping to understand the cracks in its foundation, but what he had uncovered was far worse than he could have imagined. His father's legacy was hanging by a thread, and Rodriguez had nearly destroyed everything, but they were so close now. They had the evidence. They could finally end this. When they arrived at Richard's apartment building, John and Emily stepped out of the cab, their hearts pounding as they approached the door. Richard buzzed them in without a word, and they hurried up to his apartment, their nerves on edge. Richard was waiting for them when they arrived, his expression serious. He gestured for them to sit as they entered the apartment, and John handed him the voice recorder without hesitation. "We recorded Rodriguez," John said, his voice steady despite the tension running through him. "He's still planning to move the funds, even after the accounts were frozen. And he's threatening the staff. This is everything you need to take him down." Richard took the recorder, his face grim as he listened to John's explanation. He didn't say anything as he pressed play, and the room fell into an uneasy silence as Rodriguez's voice filled the space. His cold, calculated plans, his threats, his complete disregard for the people who worked for him. Every word confirmed what John had feared for weeks. Rodriguez was willing to destroy everything to save himself. When the recording ended, Richard sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't speak, the weight of what he had just heard hanging heavy in the room. "This is damning," Richard finally said, his voice quiet. "There's no way Rodriguez can talk his way out of this." John nodded, his heart still racing. "You need to call an emergency board meeting. As soon as they hear this, they'll have no choice but to remove him." Richard glanced at John, his eyes serious. "I'll call the meeting first thing in the morning. Rodriguez won't be able to stop it." A wave of relief washed over John, but it was short-lived. There was still the matter of Rodriguez himself. The man wasn't going to go down quietly, and John knew that once Rodriguez realized what had happened, things could escalate quickly. "What about tomorrow?" Emily asked, her voice filled with concern. "Rodriguez is going to know something's wrong when John doesn't show up at the hotel. He might try to stop the meeting." Richard's face tightened. "I'll take care of it. I'll make sure the meeting happens before Rodriguez can interfere." John nodded, though the tension in his chest remained. He trusted Richard, but he also knew how dangerous Rodriguez could be. The man had manipulated the board for years, kept the staff in line through fear and intimidation, and built a web of control that wouldn't be easily undone. But they had the truth now, and the truth was powerful. The next morning, John woke early, the adrenaline from the night before still coursing through his veins. It was the day everything would come to a head, the day Rodriguez would finally face the consequences of everything he had done. He and Emily had stayed in a small hotel across town for the night, far away from Mitchell Plaza and Rodriguez's reach. They couldn't risk being seen near the hotel until the board meeting was over. As they sat in the small hotel room, waiting for news from Richard, John felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. The fight wasn't over yet. Even with the recording, there were still so many unknowns. Rodriguez's partner, Sophie's involvement, the full extent of Rodriguez's plans. But they had taken the first step, the hardest step. Emily paced the room, her expression filled with nervous energy. "Do you think it'll work? Do you think the board will actually listen?" "They have to," John said, though the uncertainty gnawed at him. "They can't ignore what's on that recording." Emily nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. "But Rodriguez, he's been controlling them for so long. What if he finds a way to spin it? What if he turns it around on us? John shook his head, trying to stay calm. He won't. He can't talk his way out of this. The board won't let him. But even as he said the words, a part of him feared what Rodriguez might do. The man was desperate now, and desperate men did dangerous things. John's phone buzzed, and he quickly grabbed it from the bedside table. It was a message from Richard. "The board is meeting now. I'll call you as soon as it's over." John exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest tightening. The waiting was the hardest part. Everything hinged on that meeting, on the board's decision, on the truth coming to light. Emily sat down beside him, her leg bouncing nervously. "I can't believe we're so close, after everything we've been through." John nodded, his mind racing with everything that had led them to this moment. The months of undercover work, the lies, the tension, the danger. It had all been leading to this, and now they were on the verge of bringing Rodriguez down for good, but the waiting was agonizing. 2 hours later, John's phone rang. He quickly answered, his heart racing as he heard Richard's voice on the other end. "It's done," Richard said, his voice steady but serious. "The board voted unanimously. Rodriguez has been removed from his position effective immediately. He's out." John felt a wave of relief wash over him, but there was a cautious edge to Richard's tone that made his stomach twist. "What about Rodriguez?" John asked, his voice tight. "Does he know?" There was a brief pause on the other end, and when Richard spoke again, his voice was quieter. "He knows. He left the hotel a few minutes ago. But John, be careful. Rodriguez didn't seem like a man who was giving up." John's heart skipped a beat, the relief he had felt only moments ago fading into a cold dread. Rodriguez was out, but he wasn't done. John Mitchell hung up the phone, his mind racing. Rodriguez was out, but Richard's words echoed in his mind. Rodriguez didn't seem like a man who was giving up. The victory that John had been fighting for, the removal of Rodriguez from Mitchell Plaza, should have been a moment of relief, but instead, it felt like the calm before the storm. The knot of tension in his chest hadn't loosened, and the feeling of impending danger only grew stronger. Emily sat beside him, her face a mixture of relief and anxiety. "He's out?" she asked, her voice tentative. John nodded, though he could see the concern in her eyes. "Yes, the board voted him out. He's officially done." Emily let out a slow breath, but it was clear that she, like John, wasn't fully convinced that this was the end. "So, why don't you look happy?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. John ran a hand through his hair, leaning forward as he processed everything. "Because Rodriguez isn't the type to go quietly," he said, his voice low. "Richard said he left the hotel, but I know him. He's not done. He's going to make his move." Emily swallowed hard, her hands clenched together in her lap. "But the board knows the truth. He doesn't have any power left." John shook his head, his stomach twisting. "He doesn't need the board's approval to do something dangerous. He still has his connections, and he's angry, desperate. People like that. They don't walk away without a fight." Emily's expression darkened, the weight of his words sinking in. "What do we do?" John stood up, pacing the small hotel room as his mind raced. They had taken Rodriguez out of the hotel, but they hadn't stopped him completely. The man was still a threat, and now that he had lost everything, there was no telling how far he would go to retaliate. "We need to be ready," John said, his voice firm. "Rodriguez is going to try something, and when he does, we have to be one step ahead." Emily nodded, though the tension in her eyes remained. "But how do we know what he's going to do? He could be planning anything." John stopped pacing, turning to face her. "We don't. But we know Rodriguez. He's always been about control. He'll try to take something back, maybe even use Sophie or his partner to cause more damage. We need to stay close to the hotel, keep an eye on things." Emily bit her lip, her gaze shifting toward the window. "But it's dangerous, John. What if he comes after you?" John clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. He had come too far to back down now. "Then we stop him, once and for all." The hours passed slowly as John and Emily waited, the tension between them thick with anticipation. Every minute that went by felt like a countdown to whatever Rodriguez was planning. John couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, something that would either end Rodriguez's reign for good or lead to disaster. By late afternoon, they had made their way back to Mitchell Plaza, careful to keep a low profile as they observed the hotel from across the street. The atmosphere around the hotel had shifted. Staff members moved quickly, their faces tense, as if they, too, were bracing for the fallout from Rodriguez's removal. John's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he quickly pulled it out. It was a message from Richard. "Rodriguez just left the hotel again. Be careful." He looked furious. John's stomach tightened. He hadn't expected Rodriguez to go back to the hotel after being removed. Whatever the man was doing now, it was clear he wasn't walking away quietly. "We need to find out what he's planning," John said, turning to Emily. "Rodriguez went back to the hotel for a reason. He might be trying to sabotage something before he's forced out completely." Emily nodded, her expression serious. "How do we get in?" "The staff's probably on edge after everything that's happened." John thought for a moment, his mind racing. "We'll have to go in as guests. No uniforms this time. If Rodriguez or Sophie see us, they'll know something's wrong." Emily frowned, but she didn't argue. "All right, let's do it." They approached the hotel cautiously, slipping through the side entrance to avoid attracting attention. The lobby was quieter than usual, but the tension in the air was palpable. John could see the way the staff moved, more nervous than ever, casting anxious glances toward the front desk, where Sophie stood, her expression cold and unreadable. "She's still here," Emily whispered, her voice tight with concern. John's jaw clenched. Sophie had been Rodriguez's most loyal ally throughout the entire ordeal, covering for him and helping him keep control of the hotel. Now that Rodriguez had been removed, she was still holding her position of power, likely waiting for Rodriguez's next instructions. "We need to stay out of her sight," John said quietly. "Let's go to the service corridors. If Rodriguez is still planning something, we'll find him there." They moved quickly through the lobby, keeping their heads down as they slipped into the back corridors where the staff worked behind the scenes. The atmosphere was even more tense here, the usual chatter replaced with anxious whispers and hurried movements. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one seemed to know exactly what. As they made their way down the narrow hallway, John's mind raced. Rodriguez had always been careful, always 2 steps ahead, but now, with his back against the wall, the man was dangerous. Desperate people made reckless decisions, and John knew that whatever Rodriguez was planning, it would be big. They reached the door to the service elevators, and John pressed the button, his heart pounding as they waited. The soft hum of the elevator filled the silence, and John couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, but they had no choice. They needed to stop Rodriguez before he could do any more damage. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside, riding up to the top floor where Rodriguez's office was located. The ride felt agonizingly slow, every second filled with the weight of what they were about to face. When the doors finally slid open, John and Emily stepped into the quiet hallway. The air felt heavy, and John's pulse quickened as they moved toward the corner where Rodriguez's office was located. But as they approached, they heard something that made them both freeze. Voices, low, tense voices coming from inside the office. John exchanged a glance with Emily, his heart racing. It was Rodriguez. He was in there, and he wasn't alone. They crept closer, staying out of sight as they listened. "I'm telling you, we don't have time," Rodriguez's voice growled. "The board is closing in, and Mitchell is onto us. If we don't act now, it's over." "We'll act," another voice replied, calm but firm. John recognized it as Sophie's, "but we need to be smart about it. If we go too fast, we'll draw attention." John's blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. Rodriguez wasn't done. He was planning something, and Sophie was still helping him. The two of them were preparing to make their final move, even after Rodriguez had been removed from power. "We'll take care of Mitchell," Rodriguez muttered, his voice filled with venom. "Once he's out of the way, We can finish what we started." John's heart pounded in his chest. They were still targeting him, still planning to take him down to protect their scheme. And they were going to act soon. Emily looked at John, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "What do we do?" John clenched his fists, his mind racing. They couldn't confront Rodriguez and Sophie directly, not yet. They needed to gather more information, find out exactly what they were planning before making their move. "We need to stop them," John whispered, "but we have to be smart about it. We need proof." Emily nodded, though the fear in her eyes was clear. "How?" John thought for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "We'll record them again. If we can get them talking about their plan, we'll have everything we need to expose them." Emily hesitated, but she nodded. "Okay, let's do it." They crept closer to the office, staying hidden as they positioned themselves just outside the door. John held up his phone, pressing the record button as they listened. Rodriguez's voice was low but filled with urgency. "We'll move the money tonight. Once it's transferred, there's nothing the board can do." Sophie's voice was calm, controlled. "And Mitchell, I'll handle him," Rodriguez growled. "He won't be a problem for much longer." John's stomach turned as he heard the venom in Rodriguez's voice. The man was desperate, willing to do whatever it took to protect himself, even if it meant destroying John in the process. But they had the recording, and this time they weren't going to let Rodriguez slip away. The cold, controlled tone of Sophie's voice still echoed in John Mitchell's mind as he and Emily slipped quietly away from Rodriguez's office. His pulse quickened, and the weight of what they had overheard hit him like a freight train. Rodriguez was still planning to move the stolen money that very night, and worse, he had every intention of coming after John to silence him once and for all. As they moved back toward the service elevator, John's mind raced. They had another recording, one that confirmed Rodriguez's plan to drain the hotel's accounts and flee before anyone could stop him. But the stakes were higher now. Rodriguez wasn't just plotting to save himself, he was preparing to make sure John didn't stand in his way. And there was no doubt that Rodriguez's threat to handle him meant something far more dangerous than a mere confrontation. "We need to get this to Richard immediately," Emily whispered as they reached the elevator. "This recording, it's enough to finish Rodriguez for good." John nodded, though his heart was pounding in his chest. They were running out of time. Rodriguez was planning to move the funds tonight, and if they didn't act fast, everything would be lost. The hotel, his father's legacy, the livelihoods of the staff, all of it would be destroyed. But more than that, John's own safety was on the line. Rodriguez had made it clear that John was a threat, and desperate men did desperate things. The elevator doors slid open, and they stepped inside, the soft hum of the machinery doing little to calm John's nerves. His thoughts raced, calculating their next steps. They couldn't risk returning to Richard's apartment, not now that Rodriguez knew they were onto him. They needed to meet somewhere secure, somewhere Rodriguez couldn't find them. John quickly pulled out his phone and sent a message to Richard. "We've got more evidence. It's urgent. Meet us at the cafe near Mitchell Plaza in 30 minutes. As the elevator descended, John glanced at Emily, who still clutched the recorder tightly in her hand. Her expression was a mixture of determination and fear, and John knew she was just as anxious as he was. They were getting closer, but the danger was escalating with every step they took. "We'll meet Richard, get the board involved again, and stop Rodriguez before he can transfer the money," John said, trying to sound confident despite the knot of tension in his chest. Emily nodded, though her eyes remained tense. "But what if Rodriguez realizes we're onto him before then? He's already suspicious, and if he finds out we've been recording him?" John swallowed hard, trying to push down the fear gnawing at him. She was right. Rodriguez had already shown he was willing to go to any lengths to protect himself. If he found out what they were planning, he wouldn't hesitate to act. "We won't let that happen," John said firmly. "We'll be careful." 30 minutes later, John and Emily arrived at the cafe, a small, quiet spot just a few blocks away from Mitchell Plaza. It was the perfect place for a discreet meeting, far enough from the hotel to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. The cafe was mostly empty, the low murmur of a few patrons the only sound as they slipped into a booth at the back. John glanced around nervously, his mind still racing with the weight of what they were about to do. The clock was ticking, and every second brought them closer to Rodriguez's final move. If they didn't act fast, everything would be lost. A few minutes later, Richard arrived, his face tense as he slid into the booth across from them. "You said it was urgent," Richard said, his voice low but serious. "What's going on?" John quickly explained what they had overheard in Rodriguez's office, showing Richard the recording on Emily's phone. As Rodriguez's voice filled the quiet space of the cafe, Richard's expression darkened, his jaw tightening with each passing word. When the recording ended, Richard sat back, his face grim. "This is worse than I thought. He's planning to move the money tonight." John nodded, his stomach churning with anxiety. "He said he's going to make the transfer tonight. If we don't stop him now, it'll be too late." Richard clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing with determination. "We'll stop him. I'll call an emergency meeting with the board. Once they hear this, Rodriguez won't have anywhere to run." A wave of relief washed over John, but it was short-lived. They had the evidence, but Rodriguez was dangerous. Far more dangerous than they had anticipated, and now that they had exposed his plans, they couldn't afford to let their guard down for even a moment. "What about Rodriguez?" Emily asked, her voice filled with concern. "He knows John is a threat. He's not going to just let us walk away." Richard nodded, his expression serious. "I'll have security on alert. Rodriguez is out of the hotel officially, but he still has connections. We can't take any chances." John's stomach tightened. They had the evidence, and they were close to stopping Rodriguez, but they were also walking a fine line. One wrong move, and Rodriguez could retaliate in ways they couldn't predict. "Meet me at the boardroom in an hour," Richard said, standing up from the booth. "I'll make sure everything's in place. We'll take Rodriguez down tonight." John nodded, though the knot of tension in his chest didn't loosen. As Richard left the cafe, John and Emily exchanged a glance. They were getting closer, but the danger was far from over. The walk back to the hotel was quiet, but the tension in the air was palpable. John could feel the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on him, each step bringing them closer to the final confrontation with Rodriguez. As they approached Mitchell Plaza, John's phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "Board meeting confirmed, 8 p.m. Be there with the recording." John exhaled slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. They had the evidence, and the board was ready to hear it. By the end of the night, Rodriguez's plan would be exposed, and the hotel would finally be free of his control. But as they reached the entrance to the hotel, John's stomach twisted with unease. The lobby was quiet, but there was a strange tension in the air, an almost eerie stillness that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Something wasn't right. They moved quickly through the lobby, heading toward the staff corridors where the boardroom was located. But as they rounded the corner near the elevators, John froze. Standing near the far end of the hallway was Rodriguez. John's blood ran cold as their eyes locked across the distance. Rodriguez's face was twisted with anger, his eyes dark and filled with venom. He hadn't expected to see John and Emily there, but the moment he did, John could see the realization flash across his face. Rodriguez knew. For a split second, time seemed to stand still. John's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing as he tried to figure out what to do. They were so close. They had the evidence, but Rodriguez wasn't going to let them walk into that boardroom without a fight. Rodriguez took a step forward, his fists clenched at his sides. "Mitchell," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "You think you've won?" John's stomach twisted as he stood his ground. "It's over, Rodriguez. We have the recording. The board is meeting tonight, and they're going to hear everything." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed, and a cold, dangerous smile crept across his face. "You really think that recording is going to save you? You're just like your father, too weak to do what needs to be done." John felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. He couldn't let Rodriguez provoke him. "Not now. This isn't about me," John said, his voice steady. "This is about the hotel. You've been stealing from it for months, and now you're going to pay the price." Rodriguez's smile faded, replaced by a look of pure rage. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Mitchell. You think you've won, but I still have control, and I'm not going to let you take it from me." Before John could respond, Rodriguez lunged forward, his fists swinging. John barely had time to react. He stepped back, dodging the blow as Rodriguez came at him, his movements fueled by anger and desperation. Emily gasped, stumbling backward as the chaos unfolded in front of her. John's heart raced as he tried to stay out of Rodriguez's reach, but the man was relentless, his fists swinging wildly as he tried to land a hit. John's mind raced. He couldn't afford to fight back. Not here, not now. He needed to get to the boardroom, to get the evidence to Richard before Rodriguez could do any more damage. "Emily, go!" John shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "Get to the boardroom!" Emily hesitated, her eyes wide with fear, but she quickly nodded and ran toward the elevators, clutching the recorder in her hand. John dodged another swing from Rodriguez, his heart pounding in his chest. He needed to buy Emily time, but Rodriguez wasn't letting up. "You think you can stop me?" Rodriguez growled, his voice filled with fury. "You're nothing, Mitchell, just like your father." John clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. He couldn't let Rodriguez get under his skin. Not now. "This is over." "Rodriguez," John said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "You've lost." Rodriguez's face twisted with rage, but before he could strike again, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. John turned, his heart pounding as he saw Richard and two security guards running toward them. Rodriguez froze, his eyes widening as he realized what was happening. For a moment, he looked as though he might try to run, but it was too late. The guards grabbed Rodriguez, pulling him back as he struggled against them, his face contorted with fury. "You think this is over?" Rodriguez shouted, his voice filled with venom. "You're all going to pay for this." John exhaled slowly, his heart still racing as he watched Rodriguez being dragged away. The danger was finally over, but as the adrenaline began to fade, John knew that this wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for the entire hotel. John Mitchell stood frozen in the hallway, his breath still ragged from the confrontation. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched Rodriguez being dragged away by the security guards, the man's shouts still echoing through the corridor. The raw anger in Rodriguez's voice lingered, a dark reminder that even though he was out of the picture, the damage he had done and the danger he posed was far from over. John ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm the adrenaline that surged through his veins. He had expected resistance from Rodriguez, but seeing the man lose control so completely had been more unnerving than he could have imagined. The threats, the venom in his words. It wasn't just a final attempt to cling to power. It felt personal. Like Rodriguez had decided that if he couldn't keep control of the hotel, he would take everything down with him, including John. Emily hurried back from the elevators, her face pale but determined. She had made it to the boardroom, handed over the recording to Richard, and had returned just in time to witness the aftermath of Rodriguez's arrest. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern as she reached John. John nodded, though his pulse still raced. "I'm fine," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "But Rodriguez, he's not going to let this go easily." Emily's eyes darkened with worry, but she didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him, reminding him that they had come this far together. "We did it, though," she said softly. "The board has the recording. Rodriguez is out. He can't hurt the hotel anymore." John exhaled slowly, nodding. "I know. But the way he looked at me," he trailed off, the memory of Rodriguez's twisted expression still fresh in his mind. "He won't stop, even with him gone. I feel like something's still hanging over us." Emily's grip tightened slightly, her gaze meeting his. "We'll be careful. Rodriguez is finished, and you have the board behind you now. We've done everything we can." John knew she was right. The evidence they'd gathered, the recordings, and the board's decision to remove Rodriguez had been the victory he'd been fighting for since the moment he went undercover. But as the adrenaline began to wear off, the weight of everything that had happened, the months of deception, the fear, the constant tension began to settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. They had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. Later that evening, John and Emily sat in a quiet corner of the hotel's cafe, sipping coffee as they processed the events of the day. The news of Rodriguez's removal had spread quickly among the staff, and while there was relief in the air, there was also an underlying tension. The damage Rodriguez had done wasn't just financial, it was personal. The fear he had instilled in the staff, the toxic environment he had created, wouldn't disappear overnight. John stared into his coffee cup, his thoughts spinning. He had inherited the hotel chain from his father, but in the time since, it felt like he had inherited something far more complicated, a legacy of trust and care that had been eroded by Rodriguez's greed and cruelty. Now, with Rodriguez gone, it was up to him to rebuild that trust, to restore the hotel to what his father had intended it to be. Emily watched him carefully, her eyes filled with empathy. "You're thinking about the hotel, aren't you?" John looked up, offering a small, weary smile. "Yeah, I thought that once we got rid of Rodriguez, everything would fall into place. But now, I'm realizing just how much damage he's done." Emily nodded, her expression serious. "He hurt a lot of people. The staff, they're going to need time to heal." John sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It's going to take more than time. The staff is still scared. They're afraid that things won't really change, that someone else like Rodriguez will come in and make their lives miserable again." Emily reached across the table, taking his hand. "But you're not like Rodriguez. You care about this place, about the people who work here. That's why you went undercover in the first place. They'll see that." John looked at her, appreciating the reassurance, but the weight of responsibility still pressed down on him. "I hope so. But I can't do it alone." Emily smiled softly. "You're not alone. You have Richard, and you have me, and you have the staff. Once they see the changes you're going to make, they'll believe in this place again." John squeezed her hand, feeling a flicker of hope. Emily was right, he wasn't alone in this fight, and while Rodriguez had done everything he could to destroy the hotel's spirit, John knew that with the right leadership, they could rebuild. The following day, John met with Richard and the other members of the board. The mood in the boardroom was tense but hopeful. The recording John and Emily had captured the night before had been played in full, leaving no room for doubt about Rodriguez's corruption. The board had acted quickly to remove him, but now came the difficult part, picking up the pieces. "We've got a long road ahead," Richard said, his voice serious as he addressed the group. "Rodriguez did a lot of damage, both financially and to the morale of the staff. We need to move carefully and make sure we're addressing the concerns of the people who work here." John nodded, his mind racing with ideas. "The first thing we need to do is address the staff directly," he said. "They've been living under Rodriguez's rule for too long. We need to show them that things are changing, and that starts with listening to their concerns." The other board members murmured their agreement, but John could feel the weight of the task ahead. Rodriguez's reign had left deep scars, and it would take more than a few policy changes to heal them. The staff needed to know that they were valued, that they were part of something bigger than just a paycheck. "I'm planning to meet with the department heads later today," John continued, his voice filled with determination. "We need to hear from them directly, what's been working, what hasn't, and how we can support them moving forward." Richard smiled, his expression approving. "That's exactly what we need right now. The staff needs to see leadership that cares about them, and you're the right person to show them that." John appreciated the vote of confidence, but there was still so much uncertainty. He had been thrust into this role by circumstance, but now it was time to prove that he could handle it. The hotel needed more than just a leader. It needed someone who could restore the trust that had been broken. As the day wore on, John met with the department heads, listening carefully as they voiced their frustrations, their fears, and their hopes for the future. The meetings were long and emotionally charged, but by the end of the day, John had a clearer picture of what needed to be done. Emily had been right. The staff needed to heal, but they also needed to feel empowered. They needed to know that their voices mattered, that they were part of the solution. John had always believed in the idea that a hotel was more than just a building or a brand. It was the people who made it what it was. And now, more than ever, he needed to show them that they were at the heart of Mitchell Plaza. By the time the meetings ended, John felt a mixture of exhaustion and cautious optimism. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in months, he felt like they were moving in the right direction. That evening, John and Emily sat together in his office, the quiet hum of the hotel's activity just beyond the door. The tension that had hung over them for so long had begun to lift, replaced by a sense of calm that John hadn't felt in months. "You did good today," Emily said, her voice soft but filled with pride. John smiled, though it was a tired smile. "It's a start, but we've still got a lot of work to do." Emily leaned closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "You've already done the hardest part. The rest, we'll figure it out." John wrapped an arm around her, grateful for her support. She had been by his side through all of it, the danger, the fear, the uncertainty, and now, as they faced the challenge of rebuilding the hotel, he knew he wouldn't have to do it alone. For the first time in what felt like forever, John allowed himself to relax. Rodriguez was gone. The staff was beginning to heal. And the future of Mitchell Plaza, though uncertain, was now in the hands of the people who cared about it most. Even with Rodriguez gone, a shadow still hung over Mitchell Plaza. The news of his removal had spread through the staff like wildfire, bringing relief to some and uncertainty to others. John Mitchell could feel it in the air, the way employees moved through the hotel halls with a mix of nervousness and cautious hope. The scars left behind by Rodriguez's cruel reign weren't going to heal overnight. John stood at the window of his office, looking out over the city as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the streets in a wash of golden light. The familiar hum of the hotel filled the background, but there was something different in the atmosphere now, something fragile. The hotel was still standing, but it felt like it was teetering on the edge of something delicate, and John wasn't sure if he was ready for what came next. He turned away from the window as Emily entered the room, her face tired but supportive. She had been by his side through every twist and turn of the last few weeks, and now, as they faced the final stretch, John was more grateful than ever for her steady presence. "You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," Emily said softly, giving him a small smile as she sat down in the chair opposite his desk. John chuckled, though it was a tired sound. "I guess I have been. It feels like we've been fighting for so long, and now that Rodriguez is finally out, I thought I'd feel more relieved. But instead, I'm just wondering what's going to happen next." Emily's smile faded, replaced by a look of understanding. "You're worried about the staff, aren't you?" John nodded, running a hand through his hair. "They've been through so much, and even though Rodriguez is gone, I can't shake the feeling that his influence is still here. He manipulated them for so long, and some of them are still afraid things won't really change." Emily leaned forward, her gaze steady. "But you've already started making changes, John. The meetings with the department heads, the way you've been listening to the staff, they can see that you're different from Rodriguez. It's just going to take time for them to trust that things are really going to get better." John exhaled slowly, knowing she was right, but time wasn't something he felt he had in abundance. The hotel's reputation had been damaged by Rodriguez's corruption, and while they had prevented the worst from happening, the fallout still lingered. There were whispers among the staff, rumors about what Rodriguez had been planning in his final days. Some feared that his removal wasn't permanent, that he would find a way to worm his way back into power. John knew that was impossible. Rodriguez was out, and the board had made that clear. But the fear of his return was a testament to the deep-seated trauma he had inflicted on the staff. Rebuilding their trust was going to be harder than he had anticipated. "I want to do more than just undo the damage Rodriguez caused," John said, his voice firm despite his exhaustion. "I want to rebuild this place into something better than it was before. My father always believed that a hotel should be like a family, where the staff feels valued and the guests feel at home. That's what this place was supposed to be, but somewhere along the way, it got lost." Emily reached across the desk, taking his hand in hers. "You're doing exactly what your father would have wanted, John, and you're not alone in this. The staff is already starting to believe in the changes you're making." John squeezed her hand, feeling a small flicker of hope amidst the weight of responsibility. "I just hope it's enough." The following day, John stood in front of the gathered staff in the hotel's main ballroom, a microphone in hand as he prepared to address them for the first time since Rodriguez's removal. The room was filled with employees from every department: housekeeping, front desk, maintenance, and more. There was a nervous energy in the air, the kind that came with uncertainty and anticipation. John took a deep breath, scanning the room as he saw familiar faces, many of whom had been working at Mitchell Plaza long before he had taken over. These were the people his father had built relationships with, the people who had once trusted in the leadership of the hotel but had been burned by Rodriguez's reign. Now it was up to John to rebuild that trust. "Thank you all for being here today," John began, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "I know the last few months have been difficult for everyone, and I want to start by acknowledging the challenges we've all faced. Mitchell Plaza has been through a lot, and I know many of you have been hurt by what's happened." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. The employees were watching him closely, their expressions a mix of cautious hope and lingering doubt. "I want to be clear about one thing," John continued. "Rodriguez is gone. He will not be returning to this hotel, and I promise you that the toxic environment he created will not be tolerated here ever again." There was a ripple of murmurs through the crowd, and John could see the way some of the employees exchanged glances, as if testing the waters of his promise. "I've already met with many of you," John said, his tone softening as he addressed them directly. "And I've heard your concerns. I've listened to the stories of how difficult it's been to work under Rodriguez's rule, and I want you to know that I take those concerns seriously. Moving forward, things are going to change. This hotel is going to be a place where everyone feels valued, where your voices matter." He could feel the tension in the room beginning to ease, though it wasn't gone entirely. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, but John was determined to make good on his promises. "We're going to make changes to the way this hotel operates," John said, his voice filled with conviction. "But more than that, we're going to make sure that everyone who works here feels like they're part of something bigger. Mitchell Plaza is more than just a hotel, it's a community, and it's time we start treating it that way." As John finished speaking, the room was quiet for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Then, slowly, a few of the employees began to clap. The sound grew louder, spreading through the room as more and more staff members joined in. It wasn't a thunderous applause, but it was genuine. And for the first time since taking over the hotel, John felt like he was finally reaching them. After the meeting, John stood in the hallway, watching as the employees filed out of the ballroom, talking quietly among themselves. There was a different energy now, one that felt lighter, more hopeful. The doubt was still there, but it was starting to shift, starting to transform into something more positive. Emily appeared at his side, her expression bright. "That went well," she said, smiling. John nodded, feeling a sense of relief. "Yeah, I think it did." "It's a start." Emily glanced down the hallway, watching as the last of the staff members disappeared into the hotel corridors. "You've already made a difference, John. They're starting to believe in you." John smiled, though the weight of the responsibility still pressed down on him. "I hope so. There's still so much work to do." Emily looked at him, her gaze soft but firm. "You're doing it, one step at a time." John exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle over him. It had been a long journey, one filled with danger, deception, and uncertainty, but they had made it through. And now, as the hotel began to heal from the wounds left behind by Rodriguez, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just running a hotel anymore, he was rebuilding a community. As the sun set over the city that evening, casting the streets in shades of orange and gold, John and Emily stood together on the rooftop terrace of Mitchell Plaza, looking out over the skyline. The air was cool, a gentle breeze rustling through the trees below. "I never thought we'd get here," John said quietly, his voice filled with a mix of wonder and exhaustion. Emily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "We did it, though. And now you get to build the hotel your father always wanted." John nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel like a weight pressing down on him. It felt like an opportunity, a chance to create something new, something better. Mitchell Plaza was more than just a hotel, it was a legacy. And now, with Rodriguez gone and the staff beginning to trust in the future again, John knew they were finally on the right path. He wrapped his arm around Emily, pulling her closer as they watched the city below. Together, they had faced the worst, and together, they would rebuild. John Mitchell stood in the lobby of Mitchell Plaza, watching as the morning sunlight filtered through the large windows, casting a warm glow across the polished floors. The hotel buzzed with quiet activity, guests checking in, staff moving through their daily routines, but there was something different in the air now. It was lighter, calmer. The tension that had once weighed down the entire building was starting to lift, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. It had been a week since Rodriguez was removed from the hotel, and though the transition hadn't been easy, John could see the small but meaningful changes taking shape. The staff had begun to relax, their smiles more genuine, their steps less hurried. The fear that had gripped them for so long was starting to fade, replaced by the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would be different now. John walked slowly through the lobby, taking in the familiar sights and sounds of the place he had called home for so much of his life. Mitchell Plaza had always been more than just a hotel to him. It was a legacy, a symbol of everything his father had worked for. And now, for the first time since taking over, John felt like he was truly living up to that legacy. As he made his way toward the front desk, he spotted Emily talking with one of the guests, her face bright with a smile as she helped them with their check-in. The sight of her, calm, confident, and so deeply involved in the work they had fought for, brought a smile to John's face. Emily had been his rock through all of this, and now, as they stood on the other side of the conflict, John couldn't imagine doing any of this without her. Emily caught his eye, her smile widening as she finished with the guest and made her way over to him. "How's it looking out here?" she asked, her voice filled with the same cautious hope that John had been feeling all morning. "Better," John replied, glancing around the lobby. "The staff seems more relaxed. It's going to take time, but I think we're finally moving in the right direction." Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's incredible how much of a difference a week can make. People are starting to trust that things really are going to change." John exhaled slowly, his mind filled with everything that had happened in the past few weeks. From the undercover work to the confrontation with Rodriguez, it had been a whirlwind of tension, fear, and uncertainty. But now, standing in the quiet morning light, John could finally see the path forward. "I couldn't have done it without you," John said softly, turning to Emily. "You were with me through all of it. The danger, the fear, everything. I don't think I could have gotten through it alone." Emily smiled, her eyes soft as she looked at him. "You weren't alone, and you won't be moving forward. We're in this together. Remember." John smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. They had faced the worst, and together they had come out stronger. Now, it was time to build something new, something better. That afternoon, John met with the department heads once again, this time in the hotel's conference room. The mood in the room was lighter than it had been in their previous meetings. But there was still a sense of seriousness, of purpose. They all knew that the work ahead of them wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, there was a feeling of unity among them, a shared goal to rebuild the hotel into something they could all be proud of. John stood at the head of the table, addressing the group with the same calm determination he had found in himself over the past few days. "We've made a lot of progress in the last week," John began, his voice steady, "but we all know there's still a long way to go. The damage Rodriguez did to this hotel, both financially and to the morale of the staff, can't be undone overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to take all of us working together." The department heads nodded, their expressions serious but hopeful. John had been meeting with each of them individually over the past few days, listening to their concerns, their ideas, and their hopes for the future of the hotel. The feedback had been invaluable, giving him a clearer picture of the changes that needed to be made. "The most important thing we can do right now," John continued, "is focus on rebuilding the trust of the staff. They've been through a lot, and they need to know that things are going to be different moving forward. We need to show them that their voices matter, that they're part of this hotel's success." There was a murmur of agreement around the table, and John could see the determination in the faces of the department heads. They had all seen firsthand the damage Rodriguez had caused, and now they were ready to help repair it. "We're going to start with small changes," John said, outlining the plans he had discussed with the board earlier in the week. "Better communication between departments, more transparency in decision-making, and a focus on employee well-being. We're going to invest in the people who make this hotel what it is." As the meeting continued, John could feel the energy in the room shifting. There was still a long road ahead, but the sense of purpose, of unity, was growing stronger with every conversation. Mitchell Plaza was more than just a building, it was a community, and now they were finally starting to rebuild it. By the time the sun began to set that evening, casting the city in a soft orange glow, John found himself back on the rooftop terrace, looking out over the skyline. It had become his favorite place to reflect, to take a step back and see the bigger picture. Emily joined him a few minutes later, her footsteps soft as she walked up beside him. "Long day?" she asked, though her smile showed that she already knew the answer. John chuckled softly, nodding. "It was, but a good one. I think we're really starting to make progress." Emily leaned against the railing, her eyes following the same skyline John had been gazing at. "You're doing exactly what your father would have wanted, John. He built this hotel to be more than just a business. It was always about the people, about creating a place where everyone, staff and guests, felt valued." John nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. "That's what I want too. I just didn't realize how far we had drifted from that until everything with Rodriguez happened." Emily reached out, taking his hand in hers. "But you're bringing it back. You're rebuilding what your father started, and you're making it even better." John smiled, his heart full. The weight of responsibility was still there, but it felt different now, less like a burden and more like a purpose. He wasn't just running a hotel, he was carrying on his father's legacy, and in the process, he was creating something new, something that reflected the values he believed in. As they stood together on the terrace, watching the city come to life below them, John felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt full of possibility. The next morning, as John walked through the lobby on his way to a meeting, he was stopped by one of the hotel's longtime employees, a housekeeper named Maria. She had been working at Mitchell Plaza since the days when John's father had run the hotel, and her warm smile had always been a source of comfort for him. "Mr. Mitchell," Maria said, her voice kind but serious, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done. Things are already feeling different around here, and I think it's because of you." John smiled, feeling a surge of emotion at her words. "Thank you, Maria. That means a lot to me. But it's not just me, it's all of us. We're building this together." Maria nodded, her smile widening. "I know. but it's good to have a leader who cares about us. Your father would be proud." John's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. "Thank you, Maria. That means the world to me." As he continued his walk through the lobby, John couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The hotel was still standing, and so was he. They had faced the storm, and now they were ready to rebuild. Mitchell Plaza was more than just a hotel. It was a community, a family, and John knew that together they were going to create something truly special. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.